Chapter 1409. The young man in white did not know the details of a land of exile, such as the reason for its establishment and the reason for choosing this place. He did not know. Yinuashing and the others could not tell or guess. As for the reasons on the surface, come on, those were all nonsense. If they could capture and deal with a group of dangerous beings, how could they not create a space that could crush them to death? Allowing them to wander freely in this land of exile that was only slightly suppressed by the rules, but seemed to be overly free, it was obvious that they were waiting for them to break out. Therefore, most of the so-called legends, records, and hearsay could not be trusted. They were nothing more than a set of nonsensical reasons that the superior life forms came up with to deceive the ignorant. They probably did not spend much effort to cover up their lies. After all, the life forms in the land of exiles would fill in the blanks themselves and help them perfect this untenable reason. Anyway, this area and the beings in it had been imprisoned for countless years in disguise. That was not all. Those fellows on the outside still had to pretend to be mysterious and create a spirit ascension ceremony to let them out. They had obviously taken over other people's space and created a land of exile to lock everyone up in it. In the end, they even left a narrow path for them to crawl out. In the end, they still wanted the people in the land of exile to be grateful to them and thank them for letting them out. Bah, how ugly. Well, that sentence was purely expressing the dissatisfaction in Yinuashing's heart because he did not like these things. If he guessed the truth completely wrong, wouldn't that be awkward? What's the outside world like? Yinuashing could not help but ask. The young man in white put his hand to his mouth and thought for a moment. A world similar to this planet. It's a unified, neat. Yinuashing saw that he was so calm that he could not speak for a long time. She could not help but ask. A world unified by one force. Yes. He nodded. There are only two places in this starry sky. One is the outside world, and the other is the land of exile where we are now. The outside world is unrestrained, but it follows some slightly loose but very broad rules. They are rules that they use to restrict life in this world. A long time ago, in the ancient times, these rules have been passed down. In recent years, they have been perfected, or so it is said. Yinuashing, Hui, and Jing Yuanji looked at each other and said in their souls, probably something like the prohibition of the reincarnation state. The two of them nodded. Jing Yuanji said, but Lord Feng, the reason behind this may be very different. The Rebirth Realms injunction is used to restrict high-level life forms and protect low-level life forms. But the regulations he mentioned, I think they were made by the unified force to better control this world. He said that the regulations are a little loose and the scope is very broad, although it feels a little similar to the Rebirth Realms injunction. Well, it's just my intuition that it may be different. Yinuashing thought for a while and looked at him. You were thrown back. Why were you thrown back? It's a little long to explain. Please wait for a moment. The young man in white smiled. He got up and walked to the wall engraved with a huge emblem not far behind him. He reached out and groped for a while before he found a secret compartment. Then he took out a pot, a bucket. Forget it. Let's just treat it as a bottle. It was a bottle that looked a little strange. Its width was like a small bucket, and there were two handles with big ears on the left and right. It also had a sharp mouth. It looked like something that was put together by the above items. When Yinuashing and the others saw that thing, they all guessed what it was. Then they saw the young man in white open the cork of the bottle and pour out the tea leaves. They were all instantly stunned. After changing the pot of tea, the young man poured tea for Yinuashing, Jing Yuanji, and Siyu. He also brought a pot of wine for Hui. Then he said faintly, the outside world is controlled by a force. Of course, there are also large and small groups that have their own camps. But no matter how the situation changes, the former is always a superior above them. They are also happy to see these large and small groups appear to help them manage their territory. They have absolute power. For countless years, those large and small groups have experienced changes of prosperity, decline, birth, and destruction, but they have never changed. The place to go through the soul ascension ceremony is the center of the starry sky outside. All the life forms that go there have to accept a certain range of management. It's just like entering a sect. They have to do a certain amount of tasks every month. Most of the time, they're very free. Yin looked up. Tasks? The young man in white nodded. Although they are tasks, and there are many different types of tasks, each of them is linked to divinity, rules, and the like. I think that they seem to want to collect the special energy of all life forms. What are they planning to do? But most people would not be able to tell. The young man in white shrugged. Yin and the others looked at each other, but did not say anything. It sounded very strange just from listening to it. Speaking of which, could that so-called force actually be the bastards of a distorted race? Collecting the rules, divinity, and some energy of the experimental subjects, intending to use them for the next step of research? That was highly likely. When I looked back at the two worlds that I had just experienced, these experimental worlds didn't exist for the sake of living happily every day. They were cages for countless lab rats. The lower worlds were used to force breakthroughs to appear. A large number of low-level and mid-level heavenly origin gods were gathered in this world. According to the information I had received, none of the experimental subjects had broken through to the high level, so there shouldn't be any more of this world. Then, what was the purpose of this world? After waiting for them to recover a little, the young man in white continued. The reason I went out was just to find a way to open the land of exile. Ahaha, this move probably involved their interests or something else. Before I could find much, I was caught in prison for 2 years and then thrown back here. Yin and the others could not help but smile bitterly. This fellow was really not afraid of death. It was not easy to escape. Before Yin could finish, the young man in white smiled. But I did not come out empty-handed. I found that we are not the only place in the land of exile. There are more? The young man in white nodded. There was a look of reminiscence in his eyes as he searched for memories that had passed some time ago in the depths of his mind. I found that there may be 20 lands of exile, but as for their specific locations, I only know 4. I don't know the rest. Yin felt a little headache. In short, he knew that this was still a somewhat strange world. There were many aspects that were strange. He did not know what rules this world followed to act, what the people behind the scenes were up to, and what they were planning. Speaking of which, why did he come over to worry about these things? Oh, yes, he wanted to follow the clues and try to find the base camp of the distorted races. After all, these worlds were important experimental grounds. There would always be a chance to come into contact with them. He could either catch one, or directly break in and then kill them. As for the experimental subjects in these worlds, he would think about it when the time came. He did not know how to deal with these beings that were both order and non-order. Yin drank a cup of tea. So, how do we do this spirit ascension ritual? You said that qualification. How do we get it? Do you want to leave this place as well? The young man in white smiled faintly. It's actually not difficult to get the qualification. The control of this planet under our feet belongs to the 3 empires. The countless empires in the eastern region are considered subsidiary. The people sent out by the Spirit Ascension ritual today are the people of the 3 empires. The eastern region also has a quota. You just need to complete the duty that your empire has. Yin and the others felt as if they had been struck by lightning. Complete the duty that they were in charge of? Did that not mean moving mountains and filling seas to create land, opening up wastelands to collect gold and stones, protecting the environment to grow plants, and raising fish wholeheartedly? Every empire in this world had its own duty. It was the ancestor of the Southern Empire who did this. In order to maintain this fictional, illusory, and dreamlike scene, he did not hesitate to use the power of the entire world to do this. But what was this? Did he want them, who were at the peak of origin, to go and raise fish? Seeing their stunned and confused expressions, the young man in white could not help but cover his mouth and chuckle. He waved his hand. This is our duty. Although there are no rules that say that the guests cannot interfere, I have never thought of asking others to help with this. If nothing unexpected happens in the eastern region this time, that quota should fall into my hands. Well, unfortunately, I can't help because I have a reason to go out. Guests, you can go to other planets with life to take a look. The conditions in the Gongxia world might be simpler. Every planet has different conditions. After all, they're all under their own control, so it is not a problem to set any rules. I remember that there's a race that only has their own people on that planet, so there's no need to fight for it. It is decided internally. Wait, you said that you have the confidence to get that quota, right? Yin Nuoxing suddenly looked at him and said, "How confident are you?" 60 to 70%, but that quota. The young man in white looked at him. Yin Nuoxing waved his hand and interrupted him. "We have a way to let you get that quota with 100% certainty, but you have to give that quota to me and let me go to the outside world. And I can take you with me. How about that?" The young man in white blinked his eyes. Even though he heard these words that sounded like a fantasy story, he didn't feel a trace of shock or surprise. His eyes were still indifferent and contained a trace of a smile. He thought for a moment and nodded. "Okay." Hui directly spat out a mouthful of wine. Jing Yuanji was so shocked that she could not hold the teacup. Yin Nuoxing was also stunned. Her cheeks trembled a few times in a daze. They believed it so directly? They did not have any doubts at all? "We can't even be considered as acquaintances. Can't you at least doubt me?" Seeing the dull and comical expressions of the three people, the young man in white knew what they were thinking. He smiled and said, "They have the power to suppress the great Tao suppression. I can't afford to offend them. What else can I do if I don't agree?" Yin Nuoxing and the other two. So he clearly knew that the person in front of him could not be offended. So he agreed so readily. But even so, he was too straightforward and calm, wasn't he? Yin Nuoxing stared at the guy who had been calm for a long time, trying to find any trace of surprise or dissatisfaction from the slightest movement on his face. However, she could not find any. She could only see that he met her gaze with a faint smile. His black eyes did not seem deep, but there was a little light twinkling like stars. His slender eyelashes fluttered along with his eyes gently blinking. He was actually flirting with him. He actually felt a little playful and cute. Ugh. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes and waved her hand in annoyance. "Don't worry, it's not a threat. I won't force you to do something you don't want to do. We have our own ways to help you. We can even bring you along with us. You just have to give me the quota when you get it." It sounds very exciting. The young man in white rested his elbows on the table and smiled. "Then, please advise me." He looked at the slightly darkening sky and said, "It's getting late today. Let's gather at the East Coast early tomorrow morning." Yin Nuoxing sighed and nodded. She did not stay here for long. She waved her hand weakly and left with her people. Somehow, she felt that the purpose of this trip was getting further and further away. She felt like she was about to break down and had an inexplicable feeling in her heart. Watching Yin Nuoxing and the others leave, the young man in white sat down with a smile after they left the palace. Interesting. I didn't expect that such an interesting guy would come out from the low-level area this time. He stretched his back, and a look of reminiscence flashed in his eyes. The low-level area, how many years had it been since they came to this place from there? They were muddle-headed and did not know why they were living in this void. They did not know what they were living for and did not know what they should be doing. They only followed the great path and followed the rules of others, living like walking corpses. I don't know which low-level area they came from. That energy is more powerful than any energy I have ever seen. Perhaps they can really make some changes. They can let us break free from this cage called the world. The young man in white laughed and could not help but pick up an irregular stone. He touched it a few times, and the stone immediately became crystal clear. South. This is the east. Old thief, let me tell you something. I met a few interesting guys here. Do you want to come and have a look? Huh? I don't have time. Fish. Has your brain turned into a fish? Our family has been rearing fish for so many years, but it's not as tiring as you, the ocean creator. You're not even a fish farmer. Speaking of which, has your glacier project been realized yet? Have you created a glacier continent? A gloomy sigh came from the crystal-like stone. It was probably not completed. The young man in white smiled. All right, I won't bother you. Anyway, come and have a look if you have time. It's fun. After Yin Nuoxing and the others left the palace, they suddenly lost their purpose. They looked at each other and thought for a while. They might as well go to the East Coast now and wait there for the arrival of tomorrow. Little star, are you really going to fish farm? Siyu shook little Xingxing's arm and could not help but ask. As she spoke, she even glanced at the coast that was not too far away. The entire eastern region was an irregular sawtooth region. Each sawtooth occupied a large area and could accommodate several small empires. They were now in the middle of the sawtooth region. There was only one eastern coast on the eastern side of the sawtooth region. Unless they crossed this sawtooth region to go to the next part, they would not be able to reach it. It would have been better if the girl didn't mention it. When she mentioned Yin Nuoxing, she looked gloomy. She was so gloomy that she wanted to give her a good beating. Siyu's face turned pale when she saw the green light in Yin Nuoxing's eyes. She subconsciously stepped back and huddled with Feng Qingwang. Yin Nuoxing grinned and carried Dao Tian on his back. It wasn't that he was reluctant to do it, because he saw her pitiful appearance. He just thought about it and didn't have the intention to carry it out. He shook his head and found Qing Jun and I Ching in his soul. He didn't know if these guys who ran to other planets would turn their world upside down. From a short description, he could roughly guess how precious the so-called quota was. The lives in this region all knew that they were in a cold and dark region. The others probably didn't have the lofty ideals of the young man in white. Perhaps they only knew about the existence of this space and didn't know that this space was about to collapse. Otherwise, they would have made a big fuss long ago. But those big shots in power should know something. If the strange young man in white knew about these things, there was no reason for them not to know. With this power, of course, if possible, they would try their best to send their precious people out of this dangerous space. After all, they were just natives who had suffered an undeserved disaster. Qing Jun, I Ching, how's the situation on your side? After waiting for a while, the two of them reported separately with tacit understanding. They also tried to make it as short as possible. The short few paragraphs made Yin Nuoxing understand. In short, everyone had their own methods, but the quota was precious, so they had to fight for it. Moreover, they had to use all their strength to fight for it. Otherwise, these high-level life forms who came in a hurry might not be able to hold down these natives who were already familiar with it. Yin Nuoxing suddenly stopped, and a startled groan came from his throat. He quickly raised his head. The sky was calm, and the starry sky was also calm, but he clearly felt some movement just now. Hui and Jing Yuanji beside him also stopped and looked up at the sky at the same time, indicating that it was not his illusion. An agitation of the rules, Hui said faintly. It's like the precursor of the space about to collapse. At the same time, I Ching, Qing Jun, and other people from the divine realm, who had just finished their report, looked up at the starry sky. They also sensed that a somewhat bad atmosphere was slowly spreading out from the void of this area of 600,000 light-years. They could not help but frown. Speaking of which, they were really unlucky recently. They were used to making a lot of preparations before taking action. Now that they had come to another world, everything was done in a hurry. They fought a battle in a hurry, and were rushed into the battlefield before they could understand this world. This is not good, Feng. It seems that we have to speed up. Don't let this space collapse when the time comes, Hui said hurriedly. Personally, I don't think it matters. Anyway, the collapse of this space will not affect us. At most, the lives of these 600,000 light-years will die. If we can save them, then we will. If we can't, then we won't force it. Do you expect us guys who have just arrived and haven't even gained a firm foothold to carry out anything immediately? Yin Nuoxing sighed and shrugged. Let's not talk about how I just arrived. You guys who have been here for 100 days can't do anything either, can you? Hui laughed dryly. Indeed, it was a little troublesome for outsiders like them to easily interfere with the affairs of this world. And he was so troublesome that he didn't accomplish anything. In fact, until today, he didn't know what to do. Anyway, Hui grimaced and looked at Yin Nuoxing with a pitiful expression. Before he could finish, the latter slapped him and turned him to the side. All right. Don't look at me with that expression. It's giving me goosebumps. Just do your best as soon as possible. Yuanji, give me a countdown. Jing Yuanji blushed when Lord Feng called her by her intimate name. Before her brain could react, She had already subconsciously carried out the order. Looking at the space, she said, "There is still a lot of energy before the power of the rules is exhausted. There is less than a month before the space begins to collapse. The entire collapse process may only last 4 to 5 days. That's enough. This time, we're counting down the days. Hui is so troublesome." Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh. Since when did he become a person who would do his best to save the world in the void? Wasn't that what this unlucky fellow beside him liked to do? Chapter 14:10. No matter where he went, it was like a whirlpool of chaotic events. No matter where he went, that place would be ravaged by violent winds. Furthermore, he had been a little unlucky recently. A storm had to be brewing, right? Recently, he didn't even need to brew his storm of events. Wherever he went, it would be triggered. He wasn't given any time to prepare at all. Every time he went to a world, he would face it head-on. Even though he was dissatisfied, he couldn't complain. Instead, he had to risk his life to save these worlds that were similarly unlucky because of his arrival. Well, saving the worlds was not his intention. He did not come here to save the worlds. So why did he deviate from his path? This matter did not have much to do with them. Hundreds of billions of people were dying. He could just close his eyes and ignore it. If we did not stare at him with that kind of gaze that gave him goosebumps, he might not have cared. After complaining, he still had to face the things that he had to face. The next morning, Yin Nuoxing and the others waited for a night and a morning on the shore where the breeze blew gently. Looking at the small waves that kept splashing on the shore, they only felt very relaxed. If not for the many things hanging on their backs, they would have really wanted to relax. The 5 of them sat in a row on the beach. After Dao Tian sneezed last night, he was put into the spiritual world. He did not know why the girl was still sleeping. Yin Nuoxing looked at the sky that changed from dark to light blue without any transition. He could not help but be stunned. He thought that he would be able to see the sky light up bit by bit, dyeing the darkness red and blue little by little, getting brighter little by little, with a hazy glimmer shining from the horizon or something. But in an instant, the sky changed from dark to bright. Although it was not very bright, it was the kind of brightness that the sun had not completely climbed up after stretching its back. The switch is so stiff. Yin Nuoxing could not help but mutter. The moment I closed and opened my eyes, it was like the world had changed. It made my other memories appear. The sun of this planet is very, very far away. It can only receive weak sunlight. Jing Yuanji's shoulder was pressed against his. She stretched out her jade-like finger and pointed at a spot in the sky. They could directly see a little starlight there. Ordinary people would need to have extremely good eyesight and widen their eyes to stare at it for a long time before they could see a very, very dim starlight. That's the sun of this planet, 10 billion miles away. How did the life on this planet survive? Yin Nuoxing could not help but feel her cheeks twitch. The stars were so far away from each other. Logically speaking, ordinary life forms should not be able to survive. However, this ocean planet did not only have high-level life forms, but also many low-level life forms. Moreover, looking at the appearance of this planet, it did not seem like everything in the world was purely relying on energy to sustain life. In short, it felt a little strange. It doesn't seem like it's purely relying on energy to survive, but energy is indeed the most indispensable unit on this planet. There are still many things that cannot be explained. Hui scratched his head and said Yin Nuoxing's opinion, and the surrounding space is a little barren. Other than the sun, other stars are at least 100 light years away from here. In this space, with a radius of 100 light years, there's only one sun and one planet. The rest is empty. It's too barren. Yin Nuoxing's cheeks twitched a few times. Is it because this planet is the center of a land of exile? God knows. The few of them shrugged and then yawned in unison. Just as they were about to stretch, they heard a faint laughter behind them. Good morning. The 5 of them turned their heads in unison and saw the young man in white walking slowly towards them. There was an indescribable elegance and gentleness all over his body. There was always an indifferent expression on his unusually handsome face. He quietly approached them and glanced at them with his black eyes. He could not help but cover his mouth and chuckle. Have you all been waiting here for the whole night? Slept for the whole night. Yin Nuashing yawned and admitted directly. She patted the two girls who were leaning on her. The few of them quickly stood up and patted the sand off their bodies. In fact, this action was completely unnecessary. When they stood up, the sand on their bodies automatically fell off. The influence of the high divinity and the high divinity had made them unstained. It was just a habitual action. So what are you planning to do? What do you usually do? Yin Nuashing glanced at him and then looked at the ocean. Fish farming. The young man in white casually said the answer that made them speechless for the whole night. Even though they were mentally prepared, they could not help but roll their eyes when they heard the answer. It turned out that he was really raising fish. If he was really raising fish, they also had many ways to raise fish. The first was the universal energy of life. No matter what kind of life it was, in the face of strong enough life energy, they could maintain their own life energy and not lose it. In other words, they would not die. The second and third were to do some small tricks in other aspects, such as exploiting loopholes in the rules and so on, or using their divinity and divine power to do things. Yin Nuashing, Hui, and Jing Yuanji looked at each other. The corners of their eyes twitched. They really did not believe that such a trivial matter of raising fish could stump the three of them. They could just do something about the rules and be done with it. By the way, Yin Nuashing suddenly clapped her hands. My name is Feng Ling. I haven't asked for your name. Qing as in guest, you as in gift. The young man in white smiled slightly. It's a very difficult name to pronounce. You could just call me Qing or you. Hui and the others only just remembered that they had known each other for a long time, but they still did not know the other party's name. After the two sides introduced themselves, there was no need to talk about business. Qing took the lead and walked into the sea. The sea automatically parted when it was 1 foot away from him, forming a zone without water. Yin Nuashing and the others were more straightforward. They did not care about the sea and walked directly into it. Where are your people? As they dove deeper into the ocean, Yin Nuashing used his spiritual power to shout at Qingyu. He shouldn't be the only one working on raising fish, right? This sounded like a big business. Speaking of which, they had walked around this place and didn't see anything like a fish farm. Furthermore, they had been diving deeper into the ocean. Could it be that this fish farm was at the bottom of the ocean? Qingyu could not help but laugh. It seems that you really don't understand. In my empire, I'm the only one who can do this. Not only in my empire, but even on this continent, I'm the only one who can do this. In fact, it's a fixed responsibility. However, occasionally, there will be some new monarchs who don't know about this. They will try to snatch the responsibility of our lineage's sole heir. However, we usually give it to them. After all, in a few days, they will realize that they can't affect anything and have an important responsibility that they cannot touch. Then, they will return it with their tails between their legs. Qingyu smiled. There was no anger or mockery on his face at all. He only said one thing faintly. This has happened many times in history. If it were not for this reason, our lineage would have been able to carry this responsibility for hundreds of years. The record would not have been snatched by a small empire that only existed for 12 years. A lineage that is passed down to only one person. We muttered thoughtfully. It is also because of this that even if you are the controller of this unique responsibility, there is no way to pass this responsibility to others and expand it to the point where it can be shared by many people. Otherwise, it would have become the Eastern Empire long ago. This has always been a regret of our family. Qingyu smiled and nodded. After all, this matter is very troublesome. There are many legends among the people that compare our family with the founder of the Southern Empire who created the world. When he said this, Yin Nuashing found a little bit of pride on his face. This sounded like flattery, but to him, it was a compliment, and it seemed to be the kind of compliment that he could accept. Siyu pulled Yin Nuashing's hand and leaned closer to her soul. Little star, the sea here is so warm. Yin Nuashing responded and waved her hand to the side. She nodded. It was indeed so. What was amazing was that the sea water seemed to be divided. They should be thousands of miles below the surface of the sea at this moment. After crossing this dividing line, the sea water in this area seemed to be much warmer. However, they did not pay much attention to the temperature. Without CU's reminder, it would have taken a while for them to notice this. Oh! Yin Nuashing was silent for a while. She looked at the core of this ocean planet. It was a stone ball that had cooled down and could no longer provide any energy or heat. She could not help but frown. Now, she had no idea where the heat of this planet came from. She also did not understand why this ocean had such a warm temperature. There were relatively more life forms under the ocean than on the continent. In terms of numbers, there were a lot of them. However, they did not see many marine species along the way. Most of them were some scattered fish or some marine life forms that they had never seen before. Even the density of life in the ocean was not particularly high. Logically speaking, at this depth, they should be able to see enough life forms to occupy their entire line of sight. So few. There are not many life forms. Feng Qin Wang pulled Yin Nuashing's sleeve and floated forward. Her sensitivity to life forms was second only to Yin Nuashing. She could feel how barren the life forms here were. Although there are still a lot of life forms, once they're spread across the entire ocean, it is as if there are no life forms at all. In the shallow part of the ocean, there are almost no life forms. So they're below us? Yin Nuashing looked into the depths. Well, she still could not see anything for a while. Yu Qing smiled. This is caused by the environment of this planet. The ancestor of the South who created this world gave this dream to others. It has been passed down from generation to generation. We have only dealt with these things on the surface. However, if we look deeper, just like what you have seen, there are still many shortcomings. Let's just talk about the ocean. The Southern Empire, who is in charge of the ocean, is very busy. The Southern Emperor is like me, raising fish every day. The failure rate should be frighteningly high, right? Yin Nuashing glanced at her. That's right. Qing nodded. This planet's initial barrenness was beyond anyone's imagination. Even if we can construct such a colorful dream now, it's still very difficult to make it more realistic. The creation of inanimate objects is one thing, but the creation of living things is a very difficult process. The Western Empire's planting of trees and grass is probably the highest level we can achieve right now. The one in the South has been trying to create new life forms in the ocean. Yin Nuashing glanced at her and continued. However, it is difficult to create life forms that are created with energy and weak rules to reach a balance that can enter the ecosystem and circulate. Those creations may cause damage to the existing balance, or they may not be able to integrate into the existing balance and add a branch to the existing balance. In the end, they will slowly fade away or be disposed of before they can cause more damage. Yes, the one in the South has been working so hard that he is bald. He even talked to me many times. Unfortunately, we can't help him. Qing nodded. Like the ones in my family, they can't jump out of the cycle. Our fish have other uses. Oh, Yin Nuashing and the others were a little interested. Jump out of the cycle, have special uses, and have other uses in this world. Interesting. They had a lot of guesses in an instant. As for the answer, they would have to see it for themselves to know. Well, we're here. While they were looking forward in anticipation, they heard his words and looked forward. They thought that they would see a building at the bottom of the sea, or simply the bottom of the sea, or an independent space, or something else. In the end, they saw a bright light. Under the dim sea, the light was very bright, as if there was a sun in front of them. Yin Nuashing felt a huge but very gentle energy coming from the ball of light in front of him. He was a little interested and narrowed his eyes to make his vision clear. Through the layer of light, he saw a red scale. Oh, it's too close. Yin Nuashing stuck out his tongue and adjusted the distance of his vision. The red scale in his vision shrank little by little, and then more of the same scale appeared. Then he could see a little bit of fiery red hair. He took a few steps back in one breath. When he looked again, he couldn't help but widen his eyes and make a sound of surprise. That's a fish? Is that thing a fish? A whale? No, a whale doesn't look like that. It's a life form whose body shape and streamlined shape are a little bit like a whale. Its body is covered with fiery red scales, and on its left and right sides, as well as its many fins, there are golden and red hair that changes in color. On both sides of its tail, there are two pieces of something that looks like a ray hanging vertically. At the front of its head, there's a lantern hanging. That lantern is the source of the light, a part of it, because it is also emitting an unusually bright light. Beside it, there are a lot of golden and red color balls, ranging from 1 foot to 2 or 3 feet in size. Those are also luminous objects, and the frequency of their color changes is the same as the frequency of the hair on its body. Little flame. Over here, Qingyu suddenly shouted under the sea, and his voice set off a wave. The strange life form that is some distance away from them heard his voice at the same time. Its huge body casually rolled around under the sea, and then it quickly swam over with some kind of energy, buzzing sound of joy. The balls circling around it became more and more numerous. Yin Nuoxing saw clearly that those luminous balls were floating out from the hair between the fins. The temperature is getting higher and higher. Siyu looked at the ball of light rushing over and felt that the temperature of the surrounding sea was rising little by little. Yin Nuoxing's cheeks twitched slightly. He looked at Hui and Jing Yuanji and couldn't help but say, could this fish be the source of the heat of this planet? This is also what the two of them thought. An underwater life form that can emit such a degree of heat when it is still some distance away. Maybe it really is, but just this one in front of them is not enough. Just when the three of them were thinking, Qingyu waved his hand happily at the ball of light. The fish that looks like a combination of a whale and some other things rushed over from afar with a rumble, bringing up waves. It almost threw Siyu and Feng Qingwang out. When it got closer, they found that it was a little too huge, almost 3,000 feet long. Boom! With the sound of rolling waves, the fish slashed past their eyes with a huge impact. The impact even cut open a gap in the seawater. They could even feel the wind blowing Yin Nuoxing and the others' hair and clothes into a mess. However, they could still stay where they were and not move. It was just that Qingyu was pushed out by the fish. Yin Nuoxing's eyes twitched, and his forehead turned black. Why is this scene so familiar? What a strange life form. Its body temperature is almost the same as the temperature of the Earth's core. Yin Nuoxing looked at the master and pet playing in the water and couldn't help but grin. Maybe it can convert its own energy into heat at a very high efficiency. It should be right. This should be the source of the heat of this planet. But one fish is not enough. Is there more? Siyu was shocked. She quickly looked around, but the light was too bright. She couldn't see far and couldn't see anything. She could only watch the ball of light and Qingyu moving around. Yin Nuoxing shrugged. I'm guessing. Let's see what the fish farmer says. By the way, is it coming towards us? Seems like it. Hui nodded calmly. The three of them were calm. Siyu and Feng Qinghuang saw the 3,000 feet long fish rushing towards them, and their hearts couldn't take it. They quickly hid behind Yin Nuoxing. Siyu couldn't help but scream, it's coming, it's coming. Feng Lingjun, come up. Yin Nuoxing, who was about to bring his men to hide, raised his head when he heard this and saw Qingyu sitting on the back of the fish, waving at them with all his might. He nodded and pulled a few people to appear beside him in a flash. Xiaohua, say hello to your friends. Qingyu patted the fiery red scales beside her. A moment later, a few foot-long golden red balls floated over from the seawater beside them. They circled around Yin Nuoxing and the others a few times before stopping in their outstretched hands. Yin Nuoxing reached out and touched the ball of light. It was warm and a little furry. A warm and comfortable energy surged into his body, and it even conveyed a friendly meaning to him. He couldn't help but turn around and saw that the two little girls had already fallen into this furry ball. When they were close to Xiaohua's body, they did not feel the temperature that was comparable to the Earth's core. The light was also not so dazzling. Another ball came over. Yin Nuoxing subconsciously put the ball on his head. He was still holding another one in his arms. He looked at Qingyu. This is your fish? Yes, it's called Xiaohua. It has been providing heat to the ocean. Xingyu nodded with a smile. Oh, Yin Nuoxing responded. He rolled his eyes. What about medium and big fires? Ah, you know them? They are on the other side. I'll take you to see them later. Medium fire is lazy. It just lies there every day. Big fire is more active than Xiaohua. It turns the ocean upside down every day. Qingyu covered her mouth and chuckled. Yin Nuoxing and the others were speechless. So, there were other fish. So they were really called Big Fire and Medium Fire? Chapter 14:11. The fiery red ball of light was like a floating volcano at the bottom of the ocean. Wherever it passed, the ocean was dyed red. It constantly released a huge amount of heat in all directions, but it did not cause the seawater to boil. However, when it passed by with its huge weight and impact, it caused the seawater to surge. The waves surged as if an underwater volcano had erupted. Occasionally, roaring sounds could be heard from the bottom of the ocean, passing through the thick seawater and into the ears of Yin Nuoxing and the others. Boom! Boom! The dull sound seemed like something had collapsed, or the sound of the explosive energy being sealed in a sealed space. After a period of time, they could be heard. Yin Nuoxing and the others did not feel any energy fluctuations. They subconsciously looked at Qingyu, but when they saw that he was still indifferent and calm, they looked away again. However, after a while, Yin Nuoxing suddenly remembered that something was wrong. It was nonsense to try to determine the situation from the face of the Emperor of Calmness. What's that sound? It seems to be coming from below. Qingyu was silent for a while. He slightly tilted his body and looked at the area below that was not illuminated by Xiaohua's light. He shook his head and said, "It's probably the sound coming from the core. This sound has existed for a long time. It seems to be especially frequent recently, but I don't see what exactly happened. Could there still be sounds coming from the core that had cooled down?" Yin Nuoxing did not believe this. If his experience was not wrong, then there must be something wrong with the core. For example, the so-called cooling down was just a facade. There might be something buried inside. "I hope," Yin Nuoxing muttered in his heart. "I hope nothing bad happened. According to the past, this place of exile might be up to something else. TSK, let's not think about it." The group followed Xiaohua and flew across the ocean for a while. They went from a place where there were few life forms to a place where there were more life forms. Yin Nuoxing and the others could also feel a slightly denser life force. They stretched their necks to look for other life forms in the ocean. However, Xiaohua's speed suddenly slowed down. The light it emitted also dimmed a little. The area covered by the light was reduced by about half, and the bottom of the ocean suddenly became much darker. Little Flame, Qingyu was puzzled. She reached out and patted the huge body beneath her. The ball of light in Yin Nuoxing's arms was probably an extension of its sensory organs. The sensory organs even expressed friendliness to them. At this moment, there was a faint uneasiness and a slight tremor coming from it. In fact, it was trembling slightly. Sitting on this 3,000 feet long island and watching it tremble, the movement was no different from an earthquake. After losing its power and sliding in the sea for dozens of miles, the small island at the bottom of the sea stopped. It was in a deadlock at this distance and refused to move forward. "There seems to be something in front." Jing Yuanji pointed to the front. She could feel the vibration of some large objects moving rapidly across the space. "It's about to appear in our sight." As soon as her voice trailed off and everyone looked ahead, they saw shadows of many objects reflected by the light appear right in front of them. Those were gigantic life forms and a large group of tribes. All of them appeared right in front of them and then rushed towards them with fear. They swam past them, avoiding Little Flame and the others, and soon left them behind. Behind them were a large group of sea behemoths that were thousands of feet in size. Their huge bodies smashed the rolling waves that came at them, stirring up invisible waves in the sea as they swept away into the distance. Did something happen in the sea? Yin Nuoxing and the others turned their heads and looked ahead. They watched as the large group of life forms in the sea panicked and swept away into the distance, as if they were fleeing for their lives. They were a little stunned for a moment. Mid-fire! Mid-fire! Over here! Qingyu suddenly stood up and shouted to the front. Yin Nuoxing and the others, who were looking behind them, turned their eyes to the front. They saw a huge ball of light rushing towards them at a speed that was not slower than those life forms just now. Soon it stopped right beside them. Mid-fire was almost the same as Xiaohua, but it looked more mature and robust. It was 6,000 feet in size, and the light and heat it released, it had shrunk back. It was hard to tell. The whole fish was a little stunned. Its hair had turned gray and lost its luster. Strange. Mid-fire is running lazily every day. Is there some kind of riot under the sea? Qingyu tilted his head and said in a strange tone. However, his face was still calm and expressionless. He reached out and touched the ball of light that floated out from mid-fire. Disturbance under the sea? Yin Nuoxing slapped himself in the face. What the hell is going on again? Could it be that he was the one who influenced her again? Two balls of light, which were more than 10 feet in size, were approaching him. Yin Nuoxing thought that it was Xiaohua's light, but when he turned his head, he found that there was a mini Xiaohua or mid-fire in the ball of light. Xiaohua's ball of light did not have these in it. Moreover, it was looking at him curiously. Perhaps it was an extension of mid-fire's senses and was more mature. He could not help but reach out and poke it carefully. Some feelings suddenly surged through his fingers, causing his expression to change slightly. Its slightly panicked senses were mixed with some memory fragments that were born not too long ago. It was lying on the seabed, which was the planet's core. Suddenly, the entire seabed shook and woke it up from its dream. Then, some powerful energy spread out from the planet's core and disturbed the surrounding ocean. The massive energy frightened it, and the races and other life forms that gathered around it out of comfort fled in all directions in fear. Then, it was flipped over by a burst of energy that was neither light nor heavy. Its huge body rolled a few dozen times in the ocean before it pathetically came to a stop. Then, it rushed over in panic without knowing where it was going. Although it was more mature, its mind seemed to be still that of a child. After being frightened, the emotions that came out from the ball of light seemed to be about to cry. It also felt a little wronged and at a loss. Let me see how mid-fire is doing. Yin Nuoxing greeted Hui and the others and leaped out alone. The ball of light that carried mid-fire slid slowly along its huge body in the water and stopped near its belly. He held the ball of light and shone it in all directions. After a while, he found what he was looking for, a wound that was 10 feet wide. Well, it looked quite wide, but it probably didn't actually hurt it. For a creature of this size to have such a wide wound, it was as if a layer of skin had been broken. Logically speaking, a wound of this degree should have healed by now, but Yin Nuoxing moved closer and let the ball of light float inside the wound. He raised his head and looked inside. This wound was much deeper than he thought. He could see flesh and blood inside. There was a thin layer of tissue that prevented the blood from gushing out of the wound. However, there was another kind of energy that was destroying that layer of membrane, the distorted energy. It was a matter of course. Well, it's useless to complain. The energy that comes out of this world to cause trouble, what else can it be other than these guys? If there really is another energy that comes out of nowhere to cause trouble, then I'd better go home. Yin Nuoxing grinned. Well, using the power of destruction to tear open a destructive wound that would never recover from in this world. Then, he would go home and call for a large group of people to attack. Casually removing the distorted energy that was causing trouble, Yin Nuoxing took out the ball of light and waved his hand slowly over the wound in front of him. As his hand moved over the corresponding position, the wound became lighter and lighter at a speed visible to the naked eye. It disappeared until it was as if it had never existed. Buzz, buzz. Yin Nuoxing had just finished dealing with the wound and floated up when he heard a joyful voice coming from the sea. Then he saw the huge body of the central fire pressing down a little, and the huge head retracted and smashed his face. With such a huge body pressing down, it could not be said to be rubbing. It was only because his body was strong enough. If it was someone else, such as that little girl CU, they would probably have been smashed into the sea by this rubbing and smashing. Patting Zhonghua's head, Yin Nuoxing returned to Hui and the others. He gave them a look and said in their souls, "The warden is behind this. As for whether it's in the present or in the past, well, the core is indeed in a cooling state. It could only be something left behind in the past that is causing some trouble now." Warden? Feng Qing Wang was stunned. She did not understand what the warden meant. These worlds were created by those bastards from the distorted races. They're used to imprison these experimental subjects and white mice. They're the wardens, Jing Yuanji said. Qing Yu swam back from below. She had just ended her conversation with Zhonghua, and there was a hint of curiosity in her eyes. However, she put those thoughts aside and smiled at Yin Nuoxing. "Lord Fengling, thank you." "It's nothing." Yin Nuoxing waved his hand casually. Looking at her eyes, they were still calm. However, she caught a hint of thoughtfulness. "Do you know something? About that energy just now?" Qing Yu calmly stroked her long hair and nodded. "That's the aura from the outside world. I once went to the outside world and felt it. It's a very frightening aura, like the aura of a law enforcer." Enforcers? This sensitive term made Yin Nuoxing and the others stunned. They quickly focused and pricked up their ears. Boom, boom. Some kind of powerful destructive energy came from all directions. Like an arrow of light, it pierced through the void and fell into the sea. Then, it shot toward Qing Yu in a dazzling streak of golden light, as if it wanted to drown out the entire area. The sudden destructive energy stunned everyone. In the time it took for them to be stunned, the light was already in front of them. In the next moment, it would pierce through Qing Yu and turn her into a hedgehog. Yin Nuoxing didn't even have time to shout and let the energy surge out. Moreover, he didn't control the strength well for a moment. Boom! The violent, dark red energy blasted a hole about 100 miles in diameter at the bottom of the sea. The seawater and all the energy were pushed 100 miles away. This place suddenly became a vacuum. Those arrows that contained terrifying destructive energy also collapsed into energy spots and disappeared in an instant. At this moment, everyone suddenly reacted. Jing Yuanji waved her hand and was about to catch the two fish that had left the sea. However, she suddenly realized that they were hovering in the air without any seawater. They looked at the scene where the seawater around them disappeared and were stunned for a moment. Xiaohua and Xiaohua can actually fly. Don't worry. Qing Yu smiled. After a moment, she patted her chest and let out a long breath. That scared me. I didn't expect that in this space they would be punished. Yin Nuoxing and the others looked at him speechlessly. "I can't tell from your expression that you were frightened just now. Haven't you been looking for trouble all this time? How could you not know about this?" Yin Nuoxing could not help but ask. "After all, I don't know anyone around me. Like me, those who went to the outside world and came back here. Those who had the chance to leave here lived carefully on the other side and did not violate any rules." Qing Yu stroked her long hair and smiled. "I was the only one who was chased back, so you know that you're special." Yin Nuoxing and the others smiled bitterly. "The enforcers are." Qing Yu abruptly shut her mouth and looked around cautiously. She saw that there was nothing around her except for the seawater that couldn't close in time. She sighed in relief. Maintenance regulations. Well, that's it. But they don't monitor that world all the time. Other than the occasional patrol, they won't suddenly appear in front of you. In other words, as long as they are not caught or informed, there will be no problems. Yin Nuoxing and the others looked at each other and stuck their tongues out. It was very similar to them. The rebirth order could not always monitor the entire realm of the gods and monitor everything, no matter how big or small. If such a situation occurred, it would be a reign of terror. Qing Yu nodded. "That's right. I have seen those enforcers a few times. The last time I saw them was when they threw me back here. Hee hee. Then, the energy on their bodies was exactly the same as the energy in the middle of the fire that I saw just now. I can't deal with it. It is very different from all the energy that I know." Yin Nuoxing narrowed his eyes slightly. This land of exile was created by those people outside, and the enforcers of those people and the core of this land of exile all had distorted energy. Could it be that there were people from a distorted race in this world? How strong are the enforcers? Yin Nuoxing twisted her wrist. Just in case, it was better to understand their strength. If they were really people from a distorted race, conflict would be unavoidable. Most of them are mid-reciprocity cultivators. When I went out in the past, I would occasionally see people around me become law enforcers. As for high-reciprocity cultivators, I've heard of their existence, but I've never actually seen them, Qing Yu said thoughtfully. In other words, the bottom line of this world was very high. Even if they triggered high-level origin energy, it would not attract too much attention. But that was not necessarily the case. After all, this world was still a cage. If someone in the cage used high-level origin energy, it was inevitable that they would be caught. Splash! The thick and heavy sea slapped against their bodies with great force, causing the group of people and the two huge fish to move to the side. Qing Yu squeaked at the two fish, and before the sea calmed down, they began to swim in another direction. The empire on the sea won't be affected, right? Yu looked at the sea that was beginning to close behind her. She was a little worried when she thought about how the energy just now could cause a tsunami. It's okay. The cities all have their own defensive barriers. A natural energy like a tsunami can't destroy them. After all, this planet lived in endless storms and waves in the beginning. It's much more serious than this. Qing Yu shook her head. The strange rumbling sound just now seemed to have calmed down after Yin Nuoxing released the law. No more rumbling sounds could be heard. The energy that made countless life forms fearful and uneasy also disappeared. The fact that Xiaohua and Ahua were willing to swim forward was proof. I'll go down and take a look. Yin Nuoxing squeaked. She got up and jumped down from Xiaohua's body. She quickly dived to the bottom of the sea. The people beside her did not have time to stop her. Qing Yu's voice was only half heard. Lord Fengling, the core may still be in danger. Cough, cough, ignore him. Hui saw Qing Yu and sighed. He waved his hand. He's like a cockroach. He can't be killed. Qing Yu responded. Her eyes stared calmly below. A trace of worry flashed across her eyes. The core of this planet was a cold stone that had cooled down for many years. At least, this was the case when one looked at it with their eyes. The distance was not very far. In just a short while, Yin Nuo planet had already descended to the location of the core. Looking at the gray and cold stone ball, it was actually a piece of land. This stone ball was a little big. When one looked at it from such a close angle, one could see that it was a piece of land on the seabed. Other than that, there was nothing else. There was no life. They were probably scared away by the movement just now. His eyes were filled with a silvery white color. He stretched out his palm and was about to place it on the surface of the land. Energy state. There's a seal. She looked at her palm pressing on the land at the bottom of the sea. She felt a different cold temperature from the surrounding seawater. She could not help but frown. Her palm touched the cold temperature of hell, but her body felt like it was in a warm, hot spring. When she reached out to touch it, she saw some scarlet energy lines flashing across the bottom of the sea. It shone toward the other end of the sea. There was a force that prevented her from delving deeper. You want to stop me? Yin Nuoxing chuckled. She gradually increased the strength in her hand. The power of rules, divinity, and divine right bloomed together. The land in front of her was stimulated. She hurriedly threw out many scarlet energy lines. Those lines connected together to form some complete energy runes. There was a hint of the runes from the realm of the gods. The runes from the realm of the gods, the form of the abyss death fog, and more. This twisted race. Yin Nuoxing's eyes flashed. What are they planning to do by taking so many other things? Just as she was thinking about the connection between these things, she suddenly felt a prying gaze. Her expression changed abruptly. She quickly withdrew her hand. A thick layer of black fog appeared around her body. She melted into the void on the spot. A powerful gaze suddenly locked onto this place at the bottom of the sea. The place that the gaze swept over froze the space, forming layers of seals. However, she did not see anything. She only saw the energy seals at the bottom of the sea slowly calming down. She could not help but squint. A weak voice echoed, as if she was whispering to herself. Someone has been here? I can't find any traces. It's impossible for anyone to hide from my sight. Then, the seal has loosened. It's not time yet. There's still one more month. Start repairing it. A huge crack appeared in the sea. A huge arm that was thousands of feet long stretched out from the crack. It cut through the sea with a rumble and pressed on the place where Yun Nuashing had just broken the seal. Scarlet energy flashed. Those broken energy seals were repaired one after another. After a long time, the hand slowly retracted into the crack and disappeared. The bottom of the sea was quiet for a long time. It was deep and dark. After waiting for about 15 minutes, the black fog surged. Yin Nuashing's figure appeared. He looked at the place where the hand pressed on and repaired the seal. He could not help but frown. It's being monitored. It seems that I can't touch it casually. Chapter 14:12. 1 month was the time the land of exile would collapse. Yin Nuo planet felt that not only the land of exile they were in, but the other lands of exile in the starry sky would also experience some changes in a month. Although from their senses, this space might collapse in a month, in reality, this might not be the case. Who knew what the owner of that hand and the group of people behind it were planning? Yin Nuo planet was in the middle of the starry sky. To put it simply, it was now the enemy's turn. They were not afraid of dealing with anything, but it was impossible to completely guess what the enemy wanted to do. For example, the distorted race might not have guessed that a group of uninvited guests had appeared in the experimental world under their control. When these uninvited guests came out in the open, it would be their turn. Now, they still needed to hide for a while until they sneaked up to the enemy. Then, they would give the enemy a fatal blow. The black fog retracted into Yun Nuashing's body, and he gently landed on the bottom of the sea. A layer of sand and dust splashed up from where his feet touched the ground. He slowly squatted down and stretched out his right hand. His thumb lightly brushed across his index finger, and the power of the rules wrapped around his finger so that the drop of blood that appeared would not melt into the sea. Then he pointed his index finger at the ground, and a drop of blood bloomed, pushing all the sand and dust on the bottom of the sea to one side. His index finger brushed across the cold ground, drawing a golden rune that was more than 2 feet long. If one looked carefully at the golden runes and magnified them 100 times or even 1,000 times, one would realize that the golden blood was actually energy that had been combined in a specific form. There were also many small energy runes among them. Small energy vortexes appeared on the surface of the golden mark, and they were devouring energy at a rather slow speed. When the energy runes were full of energy, the 2-foot-long golden runes gradually disappeared. Yun Nuashing's figure once again merged into the void. Silence. There was no movement. No energy appeared in this place, and no life forms even visited this place. It was lonely and dead. This situation lasted for half an hour before Yun Nuashing's figure emerged from the place where he had just disappeared. He looked around. There's nothing going on. Won't this level of influence be noticed? Should I make a stronger one? After thinking about it, Yun Nuashing shook his head. It would be better not to. What if the strength was just a little bit higher and he was discovered? Judging from the level of surveillance where he was discovered when his progress in deciphering was less than 5%, the energy in the runes he left behind should be just enough to cover the edges and not be discovered. Feeling uneasy, Yun Nuashing observed for a while. After confirming that he would not be discovered, he quietly left this place. Even all traces of his appearance were wiped clean from the karma. When he chased Hui and the others' auras and found them, he only saw a huge sun under the sea. Its boundless light illuminated a huge area under the sea. By the way, boundless light was not an exaggeration. It was just an ordinary description. After all, just the core of that ball of light was boundless. It was the eldest son of the Huahua family, Huahua. Its towering body was at most 10,000 feet long. Even if there was a frightening amount of energy, it still maintained its own light and heat. The non-penetrating light did not penetrate half of the sea as he had expected. It only illuminated a large area around it. Huahua's huge body was like a small island at the bottom of the sea. It was as if there were many lives around Huahua. There were also many races around Huahua. The place where the light illuminated was densely packed with life forms. Yin Oshing could feel that the entire sea, no 1/5 of the life forms on this sea planet were gathered around Huahua. At this moment, the 3 sons of the Huahua family were gathered together, which attracted more than half of the life forms in the sea. Standing within the range of the light, he could see a lively and harmonious scene. All he could see were unknown fish, unknown sea beasts, unknown crabs, unknown life forms. In short, he did not recognize any of them. Lord Fengling, over here. As soon as Yin Nuoshing arrived at this sunny place, he heard the shouts. He tilted his head to look at the most dazzling light and saw Qing Yu and Hui standing in front of Little Hua's head. Their expressions changed from time to time, as if they were discussing some topic. The 3 brothers of the Huahua family were gathered together. Middle Hua and Little Hua expressed joy and relief at his arrival, while Hua looked over curiously. It was probably because it heard its younger brother, or younger sister chattering a lot in front of it. Every 3 sentences, it would be a name that it had never heard of before. Anyone would be very curious. Hua seems to have something to give you. As soon as Yin Nuoshing arrived, he heard Qing Yu say this and couldn't help but be stunned. He tilted his head and then saw a ball of light the size of a ball stick to his body. His whole body sank into a pile of furry. His whole body was indescribably comfortable. In his line of sight, he could see a small Huahua that was exactly the same as Hua rolling and rotating inside. He knew that this was an extension of the 3 senses. Huahua used this ball of light to hit him to tell him something. It contained a trace of gratitude. He cured Middle Hua and also expressed some curiosity and something else, as if it wanted to tell him something. Yin Nuoshing hurriedly pulled himself out of the ball of light. Just as he was about to say something, a head-sized ball of light floated out from beside Little Hua. It was the ball of light that was on top of his head just now. At this moment, it was also on top of his head and rotated a few times. Then, a trace of thought was transmitted. What? What did you just say? Yin Nuoshing was stunned for a moment. He didn't hear what Little Hua said clearly. However, he reckoned that he didn't need to hear it clearly. He saw Hua suddenly open his mouth. That movement was really powerful. It was as if a crack had appeared from the middle of a mountain range that was thousands of feet tall that was a few meters away, forming an abyss-like crack. There was also a huge suction force coming from the crack. Before Yin Nuoshing and the others could react, Little Hua suddenly swung his head and threw them a distance away. Then, they were swallowed into Huahua's stomach by the flow of water. Buzz, buzz. The ball of light around Huahua flickered, expressing its joy. Will Feng Ling Jun and the others be okay? Qing Yu tilted her head and smiled faintly. This should be fine. The sudden movement made Si Yu and Feng Qing Wang scream. The 2 girls hurriedly held onto Yin Nuoshing's upper body. The group of people floated into the darkness ahead of them. Then, they saw a lot of strange phenomena. Fiery red energy surged like lava and waves of fire. It was like standing under the sun and looking outside. Their senses told them that they had entered a warm and comfortable place. Wow, were those things? Why is Hua's body like this? Ah, we hit it. Siyu looked at the myriad of images that flashed before her eyes, and she only felt that it was exciting and soul-stirring. Her beautiful face was flushed red, and she screamed and closed her eyes when she saw a large ball of flame fragments rushing towards her. When the group of people passed through the flame, they felt that the temperature had increased a little. After they left the flame, the temperature dropped again. Siyu opened her eyes in surprise and joy. Phew! What is that? What are those things around us? The inside of an energy life form's body is like this, a kingdom made of energy phenomena. Yin Nuoshing pointed at the meaningless energy phenomena in front of them and said, energy life forms don't have physical bodies. If they don't hide it, they won't materialize their bodies with the power of rules like I did. What they show is the scene you see, their own energy, the power of rules that make up the energy life form, and the self-endowed concept. These three are combined. The latter two are like a rope that binds the former so that it won't dissipate. The body you see is actually just a ball of light and powerful energy. Hua Hua is an energy life form. See, you looked at the strange phenomena that flashed in front of her eyes. She clicked her tongue in admiration. I never thought it would be like this. Feng Qing Wang pulled the person in her arms and said, self-endowed concept. What is that? In short, Yin Nuoxing pointed at her temple. She was referring to her brain, the spiritual part. The consciousness of a life form defines and limits itself. For example, who am I? What am I? The answers to these two questions are the factors and concepts that make up itself. The biggest difference between an energy life form and a physical life form is that the core of an energy life form is the soul and consciousness. The soul is the basic framework, and the consciousness is the component. With the basic framework, the consciousness comes first, and then the body. On the other hand, a physical life form has the body first, and then the consciousness. The soul is still the framework. We added, so an energy life form is not that easy to deal with. Every trace of energy contains its own consciousness, and the consciousness is limited by the soul. However, the soul of all living things is more or less the same. Yin Nuoxing pressed her chest and said to the two girls, actually, the inside of my body is more or less the same. It's just that the scene and the concept are different. The energy concept of the fire is light and heat. That's why it's like this. But inside my body, the elements of destruction and many other kinds of energy form and affect me together. What do you think the inside of my body is like? See, you and the others were speechless. It was scary just thinking about it. Yin Nuoxing twirled a lock of hair and smiled. If you're interested, you can enter my body and take a look. Also, you can tell me what it's like. What you see from other people's point of view is different from what you see from your own point of view. Enter inside. We blushed and patted Yin Nuoxing heavily. Buddy, don't talk nonsense. Yin Nuoxing tilted her head in confusion. Siyu and Feng Qing Wang also looked at Hui in confusion. He shook his head and sighed ambiguously. Jing Yuanji turned her head with a sorrowful look. 10 seconds later, Yin Nuoxing once again understood the meaning of her words. Her beautiful face flushed red. Hui screamed and was about to run away when he saw a white jade-like palm slap him in the face. He immediately rolled and screamed and flew backward. What the F***CK are you thinking about every day? Jing Yuanji covered her face speechlessly. She knew that Lord Hui would end up like this. Lord Feng's mind rarely drifted, but it didn't mean that he couldn't figure out the meaning behind it. After all, he had lived for so long. How would he not know some things? Siyu and Feng Qing Wang finally understood the question a few minutes later. They immediately blushed. Jing Yuanji couldn't help but sigh. After all, these two girls had lived for more than 100 years. They should know everything. Their reaction was so slow. They probably hadn't been in love before. After a long while, she also sighed. It seemed that she had no right to criticize others. Buddy, here, we've reached the destination. We shouted at the top of his voice, causing waves to appear in the sea. Yin Nuoxing glared in front of her with shame and annoyance. Only then did she slip away with the three girls. It was as if a huge, isolated area had suddenly appeared within the fire. The billowing seawater had suddenly disappeared without a trace. After Yin Nuoxing and the others crossed the isolation layer, they felt that they had landed on solid ground in an instant. They even subconsciously took a few steps forward, as if they had been walking all this time. Hui was standing not far ahead, holding a scroll in his left hand and waving it at them with his right hand. Yin Nuoxing glanced at the scroll and subconsciously felt a familiar aura. She couldn't help but frown. What's that? The array of the realm of the gods, Hui said in a flat tone. They all froze. Yin Nuoxing stepped forward and took the scroll from him. It was blank inside. The array had been used. Now it was just a high-quality scroll. It hadn't been damaged by external forces. He held the scroll and stroked it a few times. His frown deepened. It's indeed the array of the realm of the gods. There's the aura of the realm of the gods in it. A very powerful array was recorded here. I'm afraid, for us, well, for me, it's a very difficult array. Wow! We cried out in shock. He jumped more than 10 feet high, his face full of astonishment. In the current divine realm, there was no one other than his assistant who was the best in terms of formation skills. The second place was not even worth a fart. The former could create formations as he wished, creating thousands of formations in a second, creating formations out of thin air. In any case, we had never seen anyone who could reach even half of his level. But this primogenitor in the formation actually said that there was something that he found difficult to deal with. What's this thing? Can you trace it back? After shouting crazily for a while, we finally calmed down before he was hit. He squatted on the ground with Yin Nuoxing and leaned over to look at the blank array. Yin Nuoxing muttered to herself. Looking at the array where white and green intersected, she hesitated for a moment. Let me try. I don't know if I can do it in my current state of self-suppression. As she spoke, she took out the Book of the Epic and placed it in the center of the array. Then, palm-sized arrays appeared around her. She stacked on top of the Book of the Epic. There was a vertical line in the center of the arrays. After a while, she cut her 10 fingers and couldn't help but grin. She was bleeding today. The golden blood was the amalgamation of concept energy. Of course, it wasn't wrong to call it essence blood. For those who had a physical body, it was just that. She let the drop of golden blood fall on the array at the top and let it slowly seep into the next layer of array. Then, she repeated the process. Little by little, it dripped into the Book of the Epic. Golden and dark red light flashed, illuminating the Book of the Epic in gold and red. Suddenly, complex energy patterns appeared on the array below. Show me your existence. Murmuring, Yin Nuoxing held the Book of the Epic and let it float an inch away. The gold and red light shone on the array, causing the energy patterns to appear faster and faster. Gradually, they formed a complicated array. Even the outer part of the array was complicated. Siyu and Feng Qing Wang almost fainted. Before 2/3 of the array appeared, Hui and Jing Yuanji were declared dead. I'm blind. That thing is not for humans to read. Hui covered his burning eyes and couldn't help but smile bitterly. Sure enough, it was not easy to become an array master. Even if one could become one, they might not be able to go very far. 10 minutes later, the light from the Book of Epics faded, and the magic arrays returned to the void. An extremely beautiful magic array appeared on the originally blank magic array. The pattern looked very beautiful, but it was also very complicated. It was as if they had seen a three-dimensional maze built with a radius of 100,000 light years. Even Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes at the sight of it. I need to use my brain. It's so tiring. Yin Nuoxing sat down reluctantly. She took a look at the array and raised her head bitterly. I don't want to see. Hurry up. Don't be pretentious. I don't have the ability, so you can only solve it. Hui waved his hand, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Maybe it has something to do with them. Yin Nuoxing's pretty face was full of reluctance. However, she knew the importance of this array. If something related to the realm of the gods appeared in this world, it definitely had nothing to do with the experimental subject here. It could only be brought here by the distorted races. She was just about to concentrate on studying it with a bitter face. However, when she looked at Yin Nuoxing, she was stunned. This thing, what's wrong? Hui and the others hurriedly came over to take a look. Then they all covered their heads and eyes and shrank to the side. The spiritual destructive power of that thing was too strong. This thing looks a little familiar. Yin Nuoxing had a strange expression. She stretched out her finger and pressed it on the array. She slid along the path. It looks a little like 80%. No, this is my disintegration array of composition. This thing is very obscure, and I don't use it much. I didn't recognize it at first glance. Yin Noashing said to Hui and the others while holding the array in shock. Is this really your array? Hui was also shocked and puzzled. Disintegration array of composition. It doesn't sound like anything good. What's the use of it? The meaning of the name is disintegration of composition. However, it's not as scary as you think. This thing does indeed have offensive power. The arrays that I create rarely have any offensive power. Yin Nuashing shrugged. After knowing that this thing was created by her, the array seemed unimportant. She casually rolled it up and put it away. To put it simply, with this array, I can split you, Hui. I can split you as an individual into hundreds of independent parts. Your soul, your laws, your karma, your concepts, everything can be separated until your individual structure is reduced to a pile of parts. Hui couldn't help but gulp. He trembled and took a few steps back. His face was pale. That, Feng, the realm of the gods can't be without a guardian yet. Can you spare me? At most, I won't be so mean in the future. It's just an analogy. Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes at him. If we're talking about attacks, then it's definitely at the level of rules, or even at the level of order. Once it's torn apart, not many people can guarantee that they'll be unharmed. Then, they'll be finished. Even if there are some invincible rules, some invincible souls, and some invincible bodies, they'll be instantly killed when they encounter this magic circle. After all, the rules that belong to them are also part of the structure. Once it's torn apart, it'll be gone. However, I created this thing purely for research purposes. Hui and the others, there are many such arrays in the Book of Epics. They might be stronger. When I first created the Book of Epics, I lost a lot of hair. Yin Nuashing pointed at the Book of Epics floating beside her, creating a disintegration array. As for arrays, you have to first lock on and then attack. Just by using this array to lock on, I can know which individual has which parts. After that, I can tear apart whichever part one like. That's what I mean. I'm using it for research, and I don't deny that it has powerful offensive power. Then, my lady observer, we look conflicted. Has your array been leaked out? How is that possible? How can these things be leaked out? Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes. It wouldn't be a big deal if I were to use these things myself, but if I were to use them in the God realm and let others know that they're forbidden techniques among forbidden techniques, the laws of the God realm would distort and erase the area before anyone could use them. Without a million years of dedicated research, who would be able to use a formation of this level that I've created? Without a few dozen Empyrean gods sacrificing their own essence, who would be able to use it so casually? Furthermore, this formation diagram is clearly incomplete. It's obvious that someone stole it and made it incomplete. Lord Feng, Jing Yuanji raised her hand weakly. An incomplete array. Stole it. You said it yourself, so it's still leaked out. Yin Nuashing was startled. She lowered her head and pondered. Yes, that's what happened. But how is that possible? I can't possibly throw it out. The realm of the gods is... Wait a moment. The little angel that had been hiding in his spiritual world all this time suddenly let out a cry of surprise. She hurriedly emerged from his body, accompanied by waves of sacred music. She hurriedly steadied herself and said, I'm not too sure, but it's possible. It's very possible. It can only be that time. What the hell? Yin Nuashing and the others looked at her in confusion. They didn't know what this anxious little angel was talking about. Last time, she was slightly anxious and pulled on his arm. When you were setting up the time node, the Guardian Temple was attacked. Oh, I remember. Not only did you wake me up, you even blew up a hole and forced us to move. Move? Yin Nuashing was still speaking with a matter-of-fact expression, but her expression suddenly darkened and became abnormally serious. You were afraid that you'd forget those things that you were researching, so you recorded them down. You were too lazy to bring them with you, and you also made a row of cabinets to decorate it. We suddenly thought of something, and his expression became serious. After all, we didn't think that someone would break into the Guardian Temple. I lost most of my things in that attack. Yin Nuashing understood. That kind of attack couldn't have destroyed those things that contain my divinity so easily. When I want to clean up the wreckage, I didn't find any fragments. I thought that it was really destroyed, but now it seems that it was taken away. Hui slapped his forehead and suddenly turned pale with fright. Oh no, there are also some things that I recorded in there. Oh ho! See, you let out a cry of surprise. Chapter 14:13. It was better to say that he did not react at all. He had never thought about this before. The attack decades ago was when Yun Nuo was in a bad state. Moreover, the attack was not directed at him. At that time, the deduction was that the people who attacked wanted to stop I Ching from finding something, and they did not know what it was. Anyway, they just wanted to stop it, or they just wanted to kill I Ching together. In fact, if he had left more than 10 seconds later, he might have really become a thing of the past with the Guardian Temple. Yes, that was what he thought at that time. Judging from the power of the attack and the ashes of the land after the attack, no matter what they wanted to destroy, they had achieved their goal. The attack contained an extremely large amount of energy, and even the little angel was seriously injured when he dodged to the limit. An attack of that level could indeed destroy the things created by Yun Nuoxing and Hui. Putting aside how powerful they were, they only created things with their divine energy and did not use any special measures to protect them. Those things that were preserved were not indestructible. So they all thought that the things that the little angel could not save had turned into ashes. Then, in this place, the things that Yun Nuoxing had created himself appeared. The matter that was already set in stone had some strangeness, and there was some vague fog shrouding it. That day, those people, judging from many aspects, whether it was those who stopped Hui from setting up the time node, or those who destroyed the Guardian Temple, they were all people of a distorted race. So, destroying the Guardian Temple was convenient, but stealing their things was the main thing. Well, it could also be the other way around. They were going to kill I Ching to stop him from doing something, but when they destroyed the temple, they accidentally found a lot of things and ran away. Looking at the changing expressions on their faces, Yun Nuoxing's face did not look good. He waved his hand and said, "Anyway, it's all in the past. For the time being, there is no need to pursue the matter. What's important is that it happened. After the Guardian Temple was destroyed that day, there were indeed many things that were lost. They were all things that we thought had been destroyed. And it was also because of my negligence that I thought those places could not be attacked. At that time, the Divine Realm was not like it is now, where it kept the creation's barrier open to prevent outsiders from entering. Also, I've probably always thought that even if those things were lost to the outside world, anyone other than me who wanted to use them would have to pay a price that would allow them to reincarnate hundreds of times. That's probably what I thought. I've never thought of making up for it." Yun Nuoxing scratched his bangs in distress and sighed. "I thought I had done my best to avoid arrogance. My cultivation is still not enough." Feng Qingwang frowned when she saw that their expressions were not good. She did not know what those high-level things were, but she could tell from their expressions that it was not a good thing. She pulled Yun Nuoxing's hand and said, "Little star, calm down first. Let's analyze it first." She was actually feeling a little uneasy when she said that. Aside from Siyu, the other three were all old monsters. For her to try and calm them down, she felt that something was wrong. Phew! Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath and nodded. He could also calm down quickly, but not as quickly as the person beside him. He looked at the little girl and nodded seriously. "You're right. We should calm down and think about what to do next. What do you want to analyze?" Feng Qingwang also calmed down after he looked at her. She said seriously and cautiously, "I don't know much about those formations." You said that it is difficult for other people to use those powers and formations, but they can still use them, right? Just as I said earlier, without a million years or even millions of years of dedicated research and cultivation, it is impossible to successfully use it. Yun Nuoxing nodded and took out the formation map that he had just put away. For a formation like this, they can only use a sacrifice if they want to forcefully cast it. Spiritual energy, soul energy, divinity, and divine power that contain powerful laws are all possible. Moreover, they need to use at least a few dozen heavenly gods of origin. This array diagram appeared here. and it's trash that has already been used and thrown away. In other words, they have copied it and then used it, right? Yin Nuashing looked at her, seriously thinking and carefully speaking. He nodded and said, yes. What about the other formations or things of the same level that were lost? Feng Qinghuang's eyes flashed quickly. The price is the same. The things that Feng and I left, they're not simple things. Hui waved his hand and said, do you think they will use the same method to use the things that Feng and I created? Hui shook his head with a smile. Dozens of heavenly gods of origin. Even if they are low-level heavenly gods, they would need at least a few dozen. Even if they are high-level heavenly gods, they would need close to 1,000, and they would need to be of high quality. Where would they find so many life forms to use those things? High-level heavenly gods can be easily thrown away. They do have enough, if they really want to use those things. Yin Nuashing's eyes became extremely terrifying. These experimental subjects, these cage worlds, they have enough materials to support them. Hui and Jing Yuanji's expressions changed drastically. These experimental worlds, they had to find enough life forms from the infinite worlds in the void to give birth to origin realm life forms. There would definitely be enough origin realm or heavenly gods for them to use. Moreover, these life forms were rather special. They were half of order and half of non-order, and they used distorted energy. This was enough to increase the quality of these experimental subjects by a lot. Feng Qinghuang was still thinking calmly. She slowly led Yin Nuashing and the others to ponder the questions that she could not think of. She noticed the formation map in Yin Nuashing's hand. She thought back to what he had just said about constructing a disintegration formation. Suddenly, a whimsical idea appeared in her mind. Little star, can the disintegration formation be used against those formations? Magic array against magic array, there's basically no problem. A part of the energy lines in the disintegration magic array are used to mobilize the power of order, so it can deal with most magic arrays. As Yin Nuashing spoke, his black eyes narrowed slightly. Split. Research, something that can make those from the realm of gods unable to use. Feng Qinghuang raised her head and looked at Feng Qinghuang's narrowed eyes. She tried her best to make sure that her voice did not tremble. It will be much easier to use it if you can analyze it clearly. Even if you only understand a part of it, it can reduce the consumption of materials. Yin Nuashing completely understood what she was trying to say. Hui also understood that the speed this time would not be slower than Yin Nuashing's. He sweated just thinking about it. Oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. What are those bastards trying to do by stealing the power of the realm of gods? What are they trying to do? Yin Nuashing lowered her head and raised her hand to stroke her bangs. She had a very strange expression on her face. Do anything. There are some things that we don't do, but it doesn't mean that we can't do them. This is the void, and it controls the power of the realm of gods. What can it do? If all the lives in the middle plane and the upper plane can control 30% of the power of the realm of gods, and with the premise that they listen to orders, I can rely on them to kill the 12 primeval gods of the underworld. Even if the lord of the underworld is a mid-level primeval, or at worst, a high-level primeval, I can still rely on this. I can sacrifice 2 planes to perish together with it. Do you believe me? The sweat on Huey's face turned into a waterfall. Yes, there are some things that they don't do, but it doesn't mean that they can't do them. The power of the realm of gods was the power bestowed by the primeval gods. Since ancient times, many people rushed to the realm of gods to be the road to the highest place of gods. However, the power of the realm of gods was not so easy to control. Therefore, the 2 hypotheses that Maple mentioned just now were just hypotheses. It was impossible to do it. Jing Yuanji dared not to say anything to interrupt the thoughts of the 2 lords. She could not help but look down at the formation in Lord Maple's hand. Her pretty face was sweating. They did not expect that the thing brought by the fire would be such a thing. A puzzle piece with countless links pieced together. It even showed them part of the future. Part of the future was almost real, and it might even happen now. Yin Nuashing and Hui stood silently with their heads down. The expression on their faces was as dark as the end of the void. No one spoke. The little angel just looked at Yin Nuashing silently, not knowing what to say. This is their turn. Hui and the others raised their heads and looked at Yin Nuashing, who suddenly spoke. He took a deep breath, and his expression slowly returned to normal. However, there was a trace of unfathomable coldness on his calm face. No one knew what he was thinking. Now, they have the upper hand. This is their turn. We can only wait for them to finish their moves and then find a way to counter their moves. No, we came here to seize the upper hand and force our way into our turn. However, we still need some time. Let them take what they want. Take it, Yi Fuqian said. Yin Nuashing took another deep breath and exhaled hard. Then, a stunning smile bloomed on his face. There will be a time when they pay the price. Things haven't reached the worst situation yet. Nothing has happened yet. There's no need to think too much about despair. Hui nodded and chuckled. Of course, we still need to be on guard against the worst situation. We still need to be vigilant. However, it's just a part of the immature power that has been stolen. It's just a sneak attack from the back. It's nothing. Victory is ours. It's just that it has been delayed a little. Yin Nuashing knocked on his head with the back of his hand and transmitted the conversation to all the people of the realm of the gods in this world through his soul. After that, he said, I Ching, Lady Green, and everyone else, you have heard what happened. Other than the task at hand, try to see if there are any similar carriers of the power of the realm of the gods in your world. If there are, get at all costs. This task is very important. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly thought of something. Other than the power of the realm of the gods, there might be the power of the death mist of the abyss or the power of other worlds. However, it's hard to tell which one is which. Try to pay attention to those too. Yes, Lord, for the realm of the gods. Qingyu, who was waiting outside, was holding and tossing the furry ball of light up and down in boredom. Suddenly, he saw a ball of light coming out from the belly of Big Fire. Then Yin Nuashing and a group of people walked out of the ball of light. Just as he was about to greet them happily, he saw that all of them looked very serious. He was slightly stunned. He did not know what they had experienced inside that caused such a change in their expressions. When they gathered together, their aura was even stronger by countless times. It made him a little afraid to go near them. Feng Ling, he whispered. That thing, is it something from your world? Our world? Yin Nuashing looked a little strange. Looking at him, he could not help but ask, You know where we came from? Hui and the others also looked a little strange. When did they reveal such a serious flaw? Could it be that this thing was found by Big Fire? Yes. Yin Nuashing and the others' expressions froze. Just as they were about to explain, they heard Qingyu say, You came from the lower level areas. You can only come to the higher level areas after breaking through, just like the people from the lower level areas who occasionally appear. However, there have been a lot fewer of them recently. You might have to wait for a period of time. Yin Nuashing and the others were stunned again. They looked at each other and did not know whether to laugh or cry. So was this world. That was right, but they thought that he was referring to the world they really came from. They thought that he had seen through it, or that he had recovered his memories before he was kidnapped. When Big Fire found that thing and informed me, I felt that it seemed to be a little similar to you, so I asked you to go and take a look, Qingyu said. Is indeed something from our world. Yin Nuashing grinned. He wanted to laugh, but could not. He could only shake his head. Yes, but it's nothing special. It's just that, well, I kind of want to go back and take a look. Oh, I understand. When we left the lower level areas and came here, we also had the same mentality. We always wanted to go back, but we couldn't. Unknowingly, many years have passed. Qingyu nodded understandingly and sighed. But there's nothing else we can do except think about it. We can't find a way to go back. We can't find a way to leave this place. We can only live first. Live well. In the future, there will always be a chance. Yes, there will always be a chance in the future. Yin Nuashing nodded. On the surface, he concealed it very well. He showed an appropriate expression of melancholy, but his mood was still as gloomy as a hailstorm. Hui patted Yin Nuashing's back. Don't worry. It's useless to think too much now. Yin Nuashing shook his head. I know. But if I don't think about it, I'm worried that something uncontrollable will suddenly appear and I won't be able to deal with it. In the future, there are countless variables, countless possibilities, and countless choices. Even if it's just a draft in my mind, I have to go through it first so that I won't be caught off guard in the future. We glanced at him and sighed. I know. Don't push yourself too hard. I'll bear it with you. We're all here. Yes. Yin Nuashing nodded. His gloomy expression recovered a little. For now, they could put down part of their energy and ignore those unpredictable things. First, they had to focus on the current situation. They needed to solve the current situation and find the place where the distorted races were as soon as possible to take back the leadership. Although it was not that easy, they still had to do their best. Qingyu saw that their expressions were slightly relaxed and smiled happily. He turned around to check on the three fires. He also invited Yin Nuashing and the others to come and take a look. However, the whole scene was very familiar to Yin Nuashing. Raising fish. Was there a big difference between that and a poop picker? Smoothing its fur and checking its physical condition to see if it was not acclimatized to the water and was not in a good mood. Then he would take it out for a walk or two and make it happy. Although one was on the ground and the other was at the bottom of the sea. Well, anyway, that was what it meant. There was not a big difference. Raising fish, pets, yes, they were all pets, although this pet was a little too big. Yin Nuashing and the others watched as Qingyu grabbed Hua's biggest sensory light ball that was 300 feet in size and fiercely rubbed it. Then they saw the latter's huge body rolling on the bottom of the sea. The wind and clouds surged, and the tides rose and fell, stirring up the entire bottom of the sea. All living creatures fled, but they were not particularly frightened. They seemed to be used to it. They just retreated a little further away and waited for the guy who had been rubbed by its master to calm down. Hui was even slapped by Hua's huge tail. He flew backward and crashed into Xiaohua. Xiaohua also mischievously retreated and bumped into Zhonghua. After the lazy Zhonghua was relieved, he was too lazy to move and simply floated in the water. After being knocked into, he was directly pressed to the bottom of the sea, crushing a large group of innocent aquatic creatures. He even felt quite comfortable and squashed them a few times. Yin Nuashing looked at the large group of squashed fish cakes. There was even a cuttlefish that was 1,000 feet in size that was being pressed to the point that it was spitting out scarlet blood-like ink. It vomited until it was about to stop breathing. She could not help but laugh dryly and prayed for those little lives for a second. After a few hours, Qingyu waved her hand and pulled Zhonghua up with a bitter smile. She asked it to let go of those pitiful creatures that had already been squashed and let it lie back down in its original pit. Then she patted Xiaohua and Huahua. The latter two fishes gently touched each other. The sensory light ball also moved closer. She also greeted Yin Nuashing and the others. Xiaohua then turned and swam towards the bottom of the sea in another direction. Huahua also turned and prepared to go in another direction. The three of them are usually scattered in 3 different places. They don't stay together for long, even if they gather every day. Qingyu said with a smile to Yin Nuashing and the others. Every time Zhonghua makes a nest here, Xiaohua and Huahua have to go somewhere else. This is where Huahua used to be. So lazy. Yin Nuashing originally wanted to say this, but he felt that if he said this, he might be despised by the people around him, so he didn't say it. He just laughed dryly. He understood that the reason for splitting up was probably to prevent too much heat from accumulating in one part of the ocean. He laughed, but then he thought of what they said before they came down, and his smile froze. It seems like there isn't much I can help with. I thought you were talking about the kind of fish rearing. Puffed. Qingyu covered her mouth and laughed. Many people would misunderstand. Just like I told you before, there would be a new king who would steal our family's responsibility. However, they would still obediently return it in the end, after they understand. As for helping, you've already helped me once. Qingyu stared at Yun Nuashing and made a bow that he recognized. She said, "Thank you again, Mr. Fengling. I can't deal with the kind of injury from Zhonghua. Without you, its vitality might be greatly damaged." "Oh, that counts. Forget it then. Yin Nuoxing waved her hand. Seeing the unpretentious and undisguised look in Qing Yu's eyes, he felt a little emotional. Those were very, very important companions. They were not just ordinary pets, nor were they just for this world. They were people that he had personally raised and watched grow up, family. Therefore, he did not refuse this bow. However, he could not stand being stared at by Qing Yu, this sissy. He quickly turned his head and said, "Ahem. Well, is today's matter over? Is there any fun place under the sea?" Under the sea, Qing Yu thought for a moment and suddenly laughed. She waved her hand and signaled everyone to follow Hua Hua, who had not gone far. "There is indeed a place for you to take a look. It's also under the sea. It will be very lively there too. Hua Hua, wait for us." Under the sea? Yin Nuoxing thought for a moment and said, "That big fish farmer in the south?" Qing Yu nodded and smiled. "Let's not talk about those life forms. I think you will like that southern king." Chapter 14:14. A huge ball of light swept across the seabed like a small sun, dispelling the darkness within hundreds of miles and exposing some of the strange life forms in the ocean to everyone's sight. The life forms of the deep sea looked very different from those of the shallow sea and land. It was almost the same in the realm of the gods. However, there were also many special races in the deep sea that did not follow this natural law. Logically speaking, this should be the case for ordinary life forms. But although they had seen some strange life forms along the way, it was because they did not know who they were, but they did not see any life forms that were deformed or lacking in characteristics. At first, Yin Nuoxing thought that it was the result of the natural law of this world. But when he came to his senses and found himself sitting on the back of Big Fire, he suddenly realized that this was probably the biggest difference. It would put a few moving suns at the bottom of the sea. The existence of the big, small, medium, and Big Fire had probably taken over the guidance of most of the life forms in the ocean. Yin Nuoxing accidentally talked to Qing Yu about the existence of this planet. They had been discovered to be life forms from the lower realms, so it was natural that they did not know anything. He was also happy to ask some questions. For example, why were they all raising fish? Especially the guy from the Southern Empire who ruled the ocean. He was actually a fish farmer, and unlike Qing Yu, who was raising 3 big fish, he was actually raising hundreds of different kinds of fish, probably because the first life forms came from the ocean. He did not know if this natural law was universal. We don't know about other places, but the first life forms on our planet were indeed born in the ocean. Qing Yu smiled. This is recorded. Before we, the lower realms, visited this planet, there were only surging waves and incessant storms. According to the time, the original life forms of this planet had not evolved into a slightly more advanced life form and were still living in this ocean. Yin Nuoxing was indeed interested in this planet, but he might have to change the concept. What he was really interested in was the life forms created by a unique race, created by a distorted race. It was just a concept. For people like them who only move their fingers to create a world, the creation of ordinary life forms was certainly not of much interest to them. What he cared about was this relationship of creation and succession. Probably, he wanted to see what kind of answer they could come up with. From here, we will enter the workshop of the Southern Emperor. This entire area is his workshop. Qing Yu stretched out her hand and gestured a large area in front and behind. However, since there were no specific landmarks, Yin Nuoxing and the others could not calculate what kind of area it was. They could only assume that the place they were at now was the place where the Southern Emperor was causing trouble, while Qing Yu was reminding them. Many black shadows suddenly appeared around them. Those were groups of unheard-of marine species, fishes. Some were long, some were flat, and their fins looked like wings. Some had horns, some had eyes that took up half of their heads, some had tails that were bigger than their bodies, and some could split into individuals and put them back together. The last one should be a group. The individuals were quite small, each less than the size of a palm. They looked like transparent starfish, a bit like a combination of starfish and jellyfish. Their transparent bodies were filled with a scarlet substance, which directly attracted the attention of Yin Nuashing and the others. And it was not only the transparent starfish that was like this. If they used their energy to sense it, they would find that these groups that were attracted by the light of the fire more or less had traces of distorted energy in their bodies. Their bodies were between the energy state and the material state. Obviously, they were not as real as the life forms they saw in the sea ahead. It seems that these are the life forms they created. How is it? Can you see anything? Hui said to Yin Nuashing in his soul. Just like many man-made objects on a continent, most of the individuals are physical existences, and the rest are made up of energy. The distorted energy is probably mixed in this way. At present, it seems that the distorted energy will not affect these life forms. Just like the life forms in these areas, half of their bodies are made up of distorted energy, and they are more docile. They have long been used to it. The energy that exists in their creations is also docile. Yin Nuashing looked around. He could not see too far away, but he could touch it with his energy. There were more life forms in those dark places coming towards the light of the fire. These individual life forms almost all had the same characteristics. These life forms are not very good. Hui frowned when he heard that. Life forms are neither pure nor balanced. Right now, there's nothing special about them, so they can't pose a threat. Speaking of which, with a being at reciprocity watching over them, there probably won't be any threats. I'm afraid that they will lose control. It's just a matter of time. Yin Nuashing said. The nearby sea creatures did not dare to approach due to the majestic power of the fire. They circled around in a circle. Qingyu pointed at the fish, and the strange fish and said, "Actually, these are all failed creations. Their life forms are not stable, and they can lose control at any time. They can only be locked in this place and cannot leave this sea area. The truly stable, normal creations," he laughed. "You have already seen those. You didn't expect it, did you?" Yin Nuashing blinked and nodded. "If you didn't say it, I wouldn't have known. I thought that the life forms outside were all life forms that originated from this planet." Siyu quickly caught a long-tailed fish that flew past in front of her. She could not help but laugh as she watched it struggle in her hand in shock and fear. It jumped like a spring. The silver-yellow fish struggled for a while. Suddenly, it bent into an inverted hook and bit her wrist when she was not paying attention. The sharp pain made her cry out in surprise. She quickly let go of the fish in her hand. "What's wrong?" Yin Nuashing heard the sound and turned around. He saw her holding her right wrist and sticking her tongue out at him. "Nothing. I was bitten. It's nothing." Yin Nuashing could not help but roll his eyes. None of these small life forms around the fire would be so close. This girl must be too naughty. She must have provoked something. He shook his head and reached out to grab her wrist without any explanation. He pulled off her left hand that was covering her wrist. "Hey, it's nothing. You don't have to be so nervous. It's just a bite." Seeing him carefully examining the wound on her wrist, Siyu's pretty face blushed. She also took a look at it. There was only a row of very small teeth marks. It was only 2 inches long. There were 2 slightly larger holes at both ends of the teeth marks. They were not very deep. She had suppressed the blood and did not let it come out. After looking at it for a while, Yin Nuashing did not find any problem. He casually pressed away the row of teeth marks that did not hurt anything. He reached out his hand and flicked Siyu's forehead. "You, behave yourself." This girl was getting more and more naughty. If he did not punish her for 3 days, she would become a troublemaker. Speaking of which, when he first met her, she was very quiet and ladylike. Sure enough, he did not know her true nature because he did not spend enough time with her. When this girl threw away all her disguises and masks and appeared in front of him with a smile, he did not feel anything. It was not until now that he realized that he had picked up an extremely naughty girl. A very small episode passed by in a moment. Hui suddenly pricked up his ears. "Did you hear a dong 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 sound? It seems like someone is knocking on something at the bottom of the sea." Yin Nuashing and Jing Yuanji both nodded. Qingyu heard him and pointed to the front. The surrounding light dimmed a little. The big fire restrained its flames. In front of the bright light, there was a spot of light. "We're almost there. That's the place where the old thief works." The dong 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 sound came from there. Dong! As they spoke, as they continued to get closer. This time, they could hear a shocking sound echoing clearly in their ears. The sea water shook a little because of the sound wave. Many small creatures hovering around the big fire had already fled in fear before Yin Nuoxing and the others heard the sound. Let's go. We'll go over the rest of the way by ourselves. It's not good to let the big fire get close. Qingyu stood up and waved to Yin Nuoxing and the others. Then, he took the lead and jumped off the back of the big fire. Qingyu waved his hand and waved at the big fire, watching it wrap up a large number of creatures in this sea area and go into the distance. He laughed and turned to swim towards the light at the bottom of the sea. Without the former's small sun-like light, the light in front of them was much clearer. They could see that it was a piece of pentagonal magic circle that was 10 feet in size, swallowing and spitting out a huge amount of energy. Yin Nuoxing looked at the shining magic circle at the bottom of the sea and was a little interested. Speaking of which, the magic circle in this world was pentagonal. It was indeed very different from the realm of the gods. Even if it was similar, there was still a big difference. Delimiting the size of the area, absorbing vitality, gathering luck. Is there such a thing as luck in this world? Yin Nuoxing subconsciously analyzed the use of those pentagonal magic circles. As she looked at them, she could not help but be surprised and murmured to herself in her soul, "Is it using the characteristics of luck?" Well, for a creation of this level, luck is indeed very important. But even a magic circle of this level is used. It seems that the person who drew the magic circle is at his wit's end. There is no other way. The only thing left is to constantly and repeatedly use the things that they already know and see if they will be lucky enough to create what they want. We could not help but say, it's very similar to when I first started to create a world. At that time, I made a mistake in a rule, but I couldn't bear to destroy it and start over again. So I had to use some unorthodox methods like this. Then I stubbornly worked hard, thinking that it would be good if I could get through the difficulties by a fluke and create a special world while I was at it. When Siyu heard that he did not finish, she quickly said, and then. Hui pursed his lips and smiled bitterly. My luck was bad. What was supposed to explode still exploded, and the explosion was even worse. It was fragmented, and there was no way to salvage it. Siyu laughed dryly. It sounded like a very sad story. Luck was indeed not very reliable. No. She turned her head and looked at Yin Nuoxing. Suddenly, she scratched her head and laughed foolishly. It should have never been reliable. After all, the great observer once said, luck has no other use except to choose the worst option. Yin Nuoxing shuddered and looked around with a strange expression. Then, she turned her head and looked at Siyu. She saw that Siyu was putting her palms together in a dignified manner and moving her lips. She was probably chanting the name of Buddha in her heart. Yin Nuoxing felt puzzled. I keep feeling that something very bad floated past just now. Qingyu led the group through the pentagonal formation. Suddenly, their line of sight flashed. They saw people walking in and out of the white, jade-like building. People wearing white robes and long coats were running at a speed that was not affected by their clothes. There were also a few people wearing black robes and black masks. They had short knives, short swords, and long whips. They were dressed like assassins from some empire. They had a bunch of glowing balls on their heads and a few of them in their arms. They looked like circus performers as they ran past them. There seemed to be a swordsman as well. A swordsman carrying a sword and dozens of weapons on his back. The weapons on his back were all different. Which world was this swordsman from? Yin Nuoxing and the others only realized that they were walking on solid ground after taking 2 or 3 steps forward. The water around them was all gone. However, the scene in front of them was even more exciting than when they realized that they were walking on the ground. The scene in front of them was comparable to an emergency situation or an escape from a disaster. It was hard for them to associate this with the hall of the ruler of the ocean, especially the swordsman who was running past them. The man was wearing a hat with the word swordsman written on it. They could not take their eyes off him for a long time. Spud, don't run, Spud. Wait a minute. Qingyu suddenly reached out and grabbed a young man in a white robe who was running in front of them. The young man was suddenly stopped and called by the name that Pinger hated the most. The veins on his forehead bulged, and he opened his mouth with the force of a storm. He wanted nothing more than to greet the whole family. Which bastard is that? Why are you here? And you brought a guest? I'm here to look for the old thief. I brought someone to see what's going on. Why are you all in such a mess? Qingyu said with a smile, as if she did not hear him. The young man with the strange name sighed. There was a sudden burst of energy in the core just now. It destroyed a lot of magic circles and runic stones. Now, everyone here is busy. Boss is scratching his head because of this. Well, where's the old thief? Qingyu stuck out her tongue. Spud's expression changed slightly. He looked around and lowered his voice. The news hasn't spread yet. The others don't know. Boss is at the Hall of Detention. There are many others there as well. It's urgent. I won't say much. We'll talk when things calm down. Isn't the Hall of Detention? Qingyu blinked and understood something. Seeing Spud run away, she quickly waved her hand. Spud, be careful not to fall. F*CKU. At Yin. Old thief's name is Yangyu. Yin Nuoxing and the others were stunned for a long time as they watched the second noteworthy person leave. Then, they let out a deep breath. What is it? What's going on here? Yin Nuoxing walked closer. He had noticed that the young man named Yangyu, nicknamed Spud, had lowered his voice as if he was hiding something. There seems to be something. Qingyu nodded and looked left and right before heading towards one of the corridors of the building. He lowered his voice and spoke to them quietly. It seems that there's a problem with the place where those dangerous creatures are being held. The explosion of energy from the core just now might have destroyed part of the wards and formations of the prison. It's a mess now. Using his brain to analyze and imagine, a place where all sorts of dangerous creatures were being held captive. If he could not imagine it, it would be enough to strengthen those harmless little fellows by a few 100 million times. What would it be like if creatures of that level were to cause a ruckus in the Hall of Research? Well, with the Empyrean god of origin holding the fort, it probably wouldn't be much of a scene. It would probably be unusually thrilling but safe. However, he still had to check out the situation. He had just slipped out of a tense and violent world and came to this peaceful world. He hadn't even had a moment of peace before encountering a jigsaw puzzle piece that gave everyone headache. Now, he had to check out some other things. He really couldn't have a moment of peace. Going against most of the flow of people, Qingyu brought Yin Nuoxing and the others to the location of the prison hall. It was a dark and gloomy place from the color scheme to the decorations. It looked like a prison, but it was not people who were locked inside, but some dangerous creations. This space was an independent space. Half of it was in the void, and the other half was in the real world. Looking at it as a whole, one could see that this was a large group of buildings standing in the void. The place they had just walked out of was a gathering place for teleportation. At this moment, they were standing in front of an independent hall that extended into the void. This hall was connected to the group of buildings by a long bridge, probably so that this part could be directly sunk into the void in times of danger. When Yin Nuoxing and the others hurriedly rushed to the scene, they immediately saw that this gloomy, dark, and enormous hall of 1,000,000 feet was damaged. The lower half of the hall was even emitting energy sparks that were bursting out of energy. From time to time, it would jump and light would illuminate the void. The hall would suddenly tremble as if it was convulsing. There was also some movement inside, probably a conflict. A large number of powerful life forms were currently surrounding this building. Upon seeing them and Qingyu, they all respectfully bowed and stepped aside. Behind them, the door was already wide open. It had been blasted apart. The door had been blown away. As soon as they stepped into the prison hall, they suddenly felt as if the space here had been separated from the space outside. The feeling from just a second ago was completely different from what they felt at this moment. Scarlet and dark blue light flickered within the hall. Raising their heads, they could even see that the ceiling of the hall had been blown apart. Fragments would fall down from there as it shook, forming a pile of fragments over 10 meters to their right. Even more cracks could be seen in the corridor. There were even more traces of energy destruction in the corridor leading to the lower levels. Injured people were constantly being evacuated from that direction. Aside from around a dozen gods, there were quite a few who had just reached reciprocity. They seemed to be in extremely horrible shape. Their clothes had all been torn to shreds. One of them even had half of his body turned into transparent energy, as if he had been injured by laws. The situation below might be more dangerous than they had imagined. Qin Yu hurriedly went down. Yin Nuoxing and the others looked at each other, shrugged their shoulders, sighed, and hurriedly followed. Just as they walked down one or two floors, they heard rough shouts coming from inside, causing the walls to tremble. Group 3, take the injured and retreat. Group 1 and 2, continue to advance. Prepare the purifying rune stones. If you see any half-conscious, throw a ton of purifying stones at them. Don't even think about saving those that are completely out of control. Let them have a good dream. That idiot, come down from the sealed walls of the hall. Most of your energy has been sealed by the walls. Are you waiting for them to slap you to death? Purify group, go. Throw the purifying stones first. Don't smash the floor. There are still many uncontrollable beings below. If the floor collapses, we'll all go down to feed the fishes. Group 6. Group 6, have you infiltrated the 3rd level? Hurry up and activate the core of the detention hall's protective formation. Have it strengthen its defensive power and seal off the 7th, 8th, and 9th levels. Even if it can't hold on forever, it has to hold on until we pass through. Reduce all the energy in the upper levels of the hall and only maintain the initial momentum. Come back as soon as you're done. Your concealing stones won't be able to hold on for much longer. The one who appeared in front of them and roared like a lion from Hudong was a man who was about the same height as him. However, he looked very sturdy and muscular. His black tights outlined his strong lines. He had a face of about 30 years old, and the lines on his face were very strong. His thick black hair draped over his shoulders was handsome, but there was a bald patch in the middle of his forehead. Although they didn't know the specific situation, they could tell from the tense and serious scene in front of them and the violent energy that kept coming from below. Of course, the most important thing was Yin Nuoxing raised his head and looked at the sturdy young man's face. His cheeks twitched, and he quickly looked away. A bald patch really had a big impact. Chapter 14-15. Rumbling noises could be heard from all directions of the hall. Cracks could be seen as streaks of energy flames climbed up to the outside of the hall, which was already in a state of disintegration. Fragments were constantly falling from the main body of the hall. On one side of the hall, there was a height that was closer to the void. The falling fragments were floating in the air and did not fall, forming a spectacular cluster of fragments. Even though they were hanging there, they were still bursting with energy flames, as if some of their energy had not been exhausted. It doesn't matter if it's a hall or not. If the upper hall is destroyed, just rebuild it. Remove all energy from the upper hall. Now, immediately, use all the energy to maintain the seals on the lower, 7th, 8th, and 9th floors. As a violent wave of energy swept across, Yin Nuoxing could clearly feel that the weak energy reaction from the upper hall had risen to a very high level in an instant. Then it disappeared completely in an instant. After a long while, a huge energy reaction of the same level was felt from a short distance below. The energy transfer seemed to have ended. At the same time, the shaking and collapse of the lower hall had lessened a lot. At first, it was shaking like an earthquake. Now, there was only a slight tremor. It was probably some sort of defensive measure that had taken effect. When the situation calmed down a little, the sturdy young man in front of him slowly breathed a sigh of relief. Only then did Qin Yu speak. "Old thief, how's the situation?" He had long known that someone was coming behind him. He thought that it was backup and did not have time to arrange for it. When he heard Qin Yu's voice, he quickly turned around and stared at Qin Yu with wide eyes. "Sissy, why are you here? As you can see, the situation is not good." What a headache. I'm afraid that not only will the upper hall be abandoned, but the lower hall will also be lost. Now, we can only save as much as we can. There's a lot of important information in the hall. Hmm? These are your friends? They're the ones I told you about last time. Yu spread his hands and looked further ahead. The battle here was very tense. Many of the failed projects and dangerous lives imprisoned in the lower level were constantly surging up and attacking the defensive line set up by the old thief. Following the principle of saving as much as they could and destroying as much as they could, they did not use their full strength in the battle. More or less, they saved some of them. Of course, Yin Washing's opinion was that they did not dare to use their full strength because they were afraid of tearing down the hall and burying them alive with the failed projects. What the hell is going on? The prison hall's defense level should be higher than your imperial palaces. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any power in this area that can break through that layer of defense. Yu asked in a low voice as she looked in confusion at the intense battle in front of her. She looked at the people who were retreating to help the injured. What a coincidence, I thought so too. Old Thief frowned and scratched his head with all his might. When he realized that a few strands of hair had fallen to the ground, he let out a long sigh. Ah, my hair. He was so worried that he was about to go bald. The core that he had assumed to be eternally cold had suddenly erupted with a powerful energy blast. That level of energy blast should have been insignificant, and there was no need for much vigilance or adjustment. However, the energy blast that should have been charging in all directions suddenly charged towards him as if they had grown eyes, and most of them had landed on the prison hall. With a wave of his hand, he used energy to construct the prison hall's current form. It was broken and split into over 20 parts, and he pointed at several large cracks. It was fortunate that the core was not destroyed all at once when the initial attack landed on these parts. It was also fortunate that the core of this space was not destroyed, or all of us would have to circle around the void. Everything we lost would be lost, and nothing would be recovered. What do you mean by all of them were charging towards him? Yu was a little taken aback. 90% of the energy blast from the core had landed on the prison hall. Old Thief repeated, his bitter smile even more pronounced. He did not know what had happened from start to finish, and only knew one fact. His building had been torn down. Why would the core suddenly erupt? Wasn't there nothing all this time? Millions of years ago, it was said to be frozen. Ah, uncomfortable. Ah, headache. Yin Nuashing could not help rolling her eyes at Old Thief's nagging. There was a powerful energy seal over the surface of the cold seabed, and there were people monitoring it at all times. If the seal was damaged, they would appear at once to repair it. They definitely would not have discovered the real situation, and with such a thick seal, even Old Thief would need physical contact to probe the situation inside. Whatever the case may be, that is what happened. Let's not talk about the core for now. What should we do now? There are many dangerous creations in the prison hall, and there are many materials left from the research of those creations. Should we save those things? Yu said, waving her hand to interrupt Old Thief's nagging. Most of them can't be saved, and Old Thief looked at the place where the battle was taking place and could not help but frown. And a considerable number of creations can't survive. He paused for a moment and then stared at the model of the prison hall that he had condensed with energy and gritted his teeth. We want to go to the lower levels, but it is too dangerous, and there's a lot of leaked energy that is not easy to deal with. I don't know why they are so slow. The energy from the upper levels has already been transferred to the lower levels, and it would be enough to seal 7 to 9 more levels. Why are they still, my lord? The core of the prison hall is damaged. We can't activate the seals on the lower 3 levels. The sudden voice caused Old Thief's resolute face to darken. His back was bleak and lonely, and a thick sense of tragedy shrouded him. It cannot be dispelled, cut, and sorted out. Yin Nuashing and the others could not help but want to laugh. Save it. Quickly save it. If the core collapses, my lord, there is no way to save it. There are 6 wounds on the core from direct attacks. Most of its functions have stopped. It will collapse in 2 hours, and the prison hall can't be held. The voice on the other side was also very anxious, and it seemed that the situation was also very urgent. Old Thief's face turned pale. Ah, go to hell. Cough, cough. Things have already come to this, damn it. Then we can only give up, but before we give up, right? How is the suppression array at the bottom level? My lord, the suppression array has also lost its effect. We have lost the last means to suppress the lower 3 levels, and I'm afraid their seals can't be maintained anymore. Ah, what a sin. Ah, heavens. Bah. Old Thief patted the wall beside him with a face full of bitterness and hatred, causing the prison hall to tremble again. After a while, it returned to normal. It seems that we still have to make a trip down there. The seals on the lower 3 levels can't be reactivated, and with the current defensive power, it will be broken in less than half an hour. At that time, if the truly dangerous life forms imprison their rush out, I'm afraid that even if we banish the prison hall into the void now, it won't solve the problem. If we don't reactivate the suppression array at the bottom level, they can still survive in the void, and they won't be able to last until they are dissolved by the void. Let me interrupt. Why don't you directly get rid of those dangerous creations and instead keep them? Yin Nuashing finally remembered to interrupt at this moment and hurriedly asked. Old Thief tilted his head and glanced at Qingyu. Seeing that he nodded, he then said in a low voice, First of all, it's for research. In this line of work, all creations created by our own hands, regardless of whether they are failed creations or defective creations, need to be carefully studied to gather more information. The other reason, he laughed bitterly. Well, we can't get rid of those things either. Yin Nuashing and the others. The main reason is that we didn't expect the creations to be so powerful. They went berserk directly after emerging from their mother's womb, and they are even more powerful than me. If it weren't for the fact that they were just born, it wouldn't have been easy for us to suppress them. We could only take advantage of the fact that they couldn't move for a long time and fight them until they were tired, and then press them there to keep them in a weak state. After that, we'll find a way to kill them in the future. As Old Thief spoke, a pale shadow appeared on his face again, and he began to mutter in a low voice, F***CK, the heavens. F***CK, my luck. I've been unlucky all my life. Yin Nuashing's cheeks twitched violently, and he couldn't help but laugh bitterly. All right, it wasn't that he couldn't understand the situation. If the heavenly origin god used his own origin and several types of energy to create a life form, there was indeed a probability that it could create a life form more powerful than himself due to the abnormalities between the energies. However, there was also a limit to this. After all, there were rules and restrictions. For example, at his level, he definitely couldn't create a life form that was in the Yuanshi realm from the mother's womb. So he could only think that this guy at the 4th sky of origin was really too unlucky. There's still a lot of important information in the lower 3 levels. Now's not the time to think about information. The seal might break in 5 minutes. With their strength, they'll be able to break the seal into particles in less than half an hour after they recover. How unlucky. Heavens. How do I activate that formation? Seeing that the sad guy was still beating his chest and stamping his feet, Yin Nuashing and the others didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They couldn't help but shake their heads, and he took a step forward and said, Then, if you still have something you want from that place, and if you still have something you want from this moment, how about we make a deal? Song. What did you say? Old Thief was stunned when he heard this. He turned his head and saw Yin Nuashing looking at him with a very serious expression. He couldn't help but scratch the hair in front of his forehead again. What deal? Your information? The information about those creations. I only want the basic information, such as energy circulation, the most basic habits, and so on. They have their unique characteristics compared to normal life forms. I don't want that kind of information about a single individual. Also, I need a quota for the soul ascension ceremony. Yin Nuashing finished in one breath. Old Thief was slightly stunned, and his eyes flickered. Agree to it. That's it. Use my quota. Before Old Thief could speak, Qingyu spoke first, and the former was slightly stunned. He thought for a moment, weighed in his heart, and nodded. This is not a problem. Then, can you solve the problem in front of us? Yes. Yin Nuashing nodded. Do you want to dismantle the entire hall or save a part of it? Is there anything you want to preserve? Is there any special life form that you can't kill? Is there anything you can't fight? Is there anything you can't be scared of? Or, headache. Stop, stop, stop. Don't say any more. I'll go with you. We'll talk after we see it. Old Thief hurriedly waved his hand. He felt a headache coming on when he heard him smash down a series of things. Yin Nuashing thought for a moment and nodded. That's fine. Old Thief heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. He waved his hand and shouted, Everyone, retreat to the first line of defense. Act according to the deployment just now. Team 6, quickly come back and assist in the defense. You don't have much time left. Don't do anything else before we come back. After 2 hours, retreat without any orders and give up on the prison hall. The core of the 3rd floor has been destroyed, and the prison hall is basically unusable. We have an hour, and after an hour, if we can't succeed, we'll have to retreat. Before that, the prison hall must be banished into the void, or it will affect this space. In the end, whether or not we can activate the suppression formation or save anything, we'll have to retreat. I'll try to reverse the flow of energy from the core and detonate the prison hall when it enters the void, destroying all those things. 2 hours is plenty of time. It's not a problem. Yin Nuashing shrugged, indicating that there was no pressure at all. Don't worry. Although we came from a low-level area, we are much more powerful than you think. After that, Old Thief handed over the armor and robes again. Yin Nuashing waved his hand and said, We don't need these. We can handle it ourselves. You just have to pay attention to your own safety. Old Thief had nothing else to say. He nodded and began to prepare. I will use the remaining energy of the prison hall to teleport us directly to the 5th floor. We may be attacked as soon as we come out. Be prepared. While he was preparing, the people guarding the front line were also following orders and retreating bit by bit. Some of them were dragging the unconscious creations, and some were retreating with injuries. When they were retreating, they did not forget to take care of the people around them who were also covering for them. They were moving toward the entrance of the 2nd floor where they were. Footsteps were also heard on the 1st floor. A batch of reinforcements had arrived. Among them were those who were dressed like assassins. There were also some who wore a swordsman hat and carried a lot of weapons that did not seem to be useful. There were quite a lot of them. The tragic atmosphere, with sorrowful faces, made it seem like they were ready to die on the battlefield. The clothes of your family's combatants are still so unique. Qingyu could not help but say when she saw hundreds of people rushing over. Old Thief laughed dryly and focused on preparing for the teleportation. Yin Nuashing took a deep breath and extended his hand to Siyu and Feng Qingwang. The road ahead will be a little messy. You two should hide first. The weakest life forms they would encounter below were probably early heavenly gods. The strongest life forms were a group of uncontrollable life forms around the 4th or 5th heavenly layer of Origin Realm. He did not dare to let Siyu and Feng Qingwang follow him carelessly. It would be troublesome if something happened. Hide. Where should we hide? The 2 girls looked at his outstretched hand and subconsciously held it with both hands. Then they were stunned. Where should we hide? Yin Nuashing squeezed their soft hands and extended his soul force. He guided them. Relax your soul force. Come, take a breath and slowly exhale. Come in. A transparent light flashed across Siyu and Feng Qinghuang's body. The 2 girls rushed into his forehead with their soul force. When they came back to their senses, they saw themselves slowly falling from the sky and landing in a courtyard. They could not help but look at each other. Snore. He also heard a soft snoring sound. Turning his gaze, he saw an extremely dreamy and extravagant bed woven from countless flowers and vines in the courtyard. A young girl with a pair of wings on her back was curled up on the bed of flowers. She was hugging a purple ball that flickered with the light of a nebula. She was sleeping peacefully, and her 3-meter-wide wings covered Dao Heaven's face. The little girl looked as if she was about to be suffocated by the wings, and her body twisted and turned restlessly. Yin Nuashing and the 2 girls Cough, cough. This is my spiritual world. You two can walk around freely. Yin Nuashing said. After thinking for a while, he said, this place can build a house. If you want cough, do whatever you want. Heavens, what did he just say? Now that he said that, wouldn't he see a strange cave or mansion the next time he entered the spiritual world? Don't touch the mountains and rivers in the distance. Don't touch them. Don't touch them. He warned. Those were the origin energies. Heavens, he did not even say anything. He was done for. He was already used to the group of girls causing trouble in his spiritual world. Looking at the two girls whose eyes suddenly became sharp, he guessed that they did not have any good intentions. Let's go. Old Thief shouted. The teleportation circle flashed fiercely and disappeared with Qing Yu and Yin Nuashing. The sudden change of vision made Yin Nuashing, who had turned into a sad person, return to her serious state. A thick layer of energy light appeared in front of them and dissipated little by little, revealing the scene behind. They appeared in midair. It was a huge hall with walls on all sides like the second floor. One of the walls even had an exaggeratedly huge hole. However, there was still a magic circle that barely maintained its integrity. Those creatures with poor brains did not seem to have thought of leaving from there. Below them, they could see many magic circles and domains built by the magic circles. There were also many strange small buildings, but they were all broken. Other than that, there were hundreds of creatures below, all of whom looked particularly ferocious and twisted. Bang! Yin Nuashing waved her hand casually, and a group of cannon fodder flew out with a force. There was an empty space for them to land. The five of them landed uniformly and began to rub their hands together as they looked at the dangerous creatures that were constantly approaching them. Are there any taboos? Are there any that you can't bear to kill? Are there any special models? If not, I'm going to start fighting? Hui used his elbow to poke Old Thief and opened his mouth to slap Old Thief's face. Old Thief smiled bitterly and quickly looked at the hall on the 5th floor. He shook his head before those strange creatures were about to go berserk. If possible, keep the place. There's nothing else. Okay, Hui responded. His figure turned into a golden light and shot out in an instant. He rushed into the middle of a group of crazy creatures and smashed those strange-looking creatures into pieces. The ground was full of broken limbs. Yin Nuashing grabbed a creature that looked like a combination of a big turtle and a big octopus that was charging at her face. With a straight punch, she caved in its face and shattered its turtle shell. After confirming that it had fainted, she threw it behind her and clapped her hands before continuing to walk forward. Jing Yuanji waved her hand. The space solidified and smashed down, smashing a large group of creatures into confusion. She waved her other hand again and threw the fainted creatures to the place where Yin Nuashing had thrown them. Then, she followed the ladder and continued to walk forward. Old Thief was stunned at this moment. Qing Yu still had a smile on her face. Seeing the former in a daze, she patted his shoulder. What are you staring at? If there's anything you want to recycle, go quickly. Oh, recycle. That's right, recycle. Old Thief's body quivered. He hurriedly rushed to those almost dimmed formations and took out a 2-inch tall, triangular black crystal from the core of those formations. Following the appearance of these crystals, those formations that had persisted bitterly until now also quietly disappeared. Yin Nuashing watched this scene with the back of her head, showing an interested look. The black crystal was the core of the array, recording the information of the array and the information collected during the operation of the array. Although it was not like him, who could get the array to directly feed back the information to him, the advantage was that he could leave a record for others to see, in case the person who set up the array died. Compared with the previous world, the environment here is really kind. Jing Yuanji clapped her hands and said casually, "Finally, there's no more such an exaggerated number." She made a huge, exaggerated gesture with both hands. She still remembered that after the battle in the spirit-gathering continent, Qing Jun had madly muttered in her ear, "Can't kill them all. Can't kill them all." Thinking about this situation, she felt a headache. Finally, there were not so many things for them to kill here. It would only take a few minutes to clean it up. Yin Nuoxing glanced at her and suddenly pretended to smile profoundly. Little girl, you're too young. Think about the two worlds we've encountered before. Do you think the situation in this world will be easier? No, 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 this is just a remote place, a corner where birds don't lay eggs, and it's just a small hall. Don't forget that we were dealing with the power of the entire world before. This time if... Hee hee. After hearing this, Jing Yuanji's legs began to soften. She stared at Lord Feng with tears in her eyes. She instantly felt that she was about to become a tragic figure. If this world also had that kind of power, there would probably be more Origin Realm enemies joining this time. Thinking of that situation, she wanted to faint. Chapter 14:16. The hall was filled with distorted energy that did not dissipate. It seemed to be released by those unstable life forms. Compared to the perfectly integrated distorted energy on Qingyu and the others, the energy that permeated here was more destructive, just like the situation in the spirit gathering continent. The destructive, distorted energy distorted the solid structure of the hall, the corridor, and the walls into a strange painting. Those life forms that were blinded by the distorted energy charged at Yin Nuoxing and the others 12 times without any regard for their lives. Then they were all thrown behind and piled up into a 100-meter-high mountain. They were all unconscious, and only a few dozen of them could not withstand the beating. Only some fragments were casually piled at the bottom of the mountain. Old Crook energetically dealt with the remaining magic circles in the hall that had not been destroyed. He took away all the information that could be picked up and also some of the limbs of some strange life forms on the mountain. Meanwhile, Qingyu was inspecting the space to see if there was any place that had been missed. However, this destruction is truly thorough. Yin Nuoxing looked around. The distorted energy lingered in the hall. He was too lazy to deal with it. He only opened a barrier to isolate the energy that could only make him feel a little uncomfortable. Seeing Jing Yuanji come over, he opened the barrier a little wider. They also walked around the hall, observing the hall, and at the same time, bypassing the places where there were traces of cracks and destruction of the rules that were entangled by the distorted energy. This kind of energy was extremely destructive. Just by accumulating this kind of energy, the structure of the hall had already become much weaker. The result of that kind of destruction would only appear after being washed away by time for countless years. Lord Feng, look here. Jing Yuanji suddenly noticed something. She quickly reached out and grabbed Yin Nuoxing's arm. Yin Nuoxing turned his head and saw a sunken hole where Jing Yuanji's finger was pointing. 1/3 of the energy in the hall was gathering there, condensing into a dense mass of distorted energy. At first, the mass of energy should still be on the ground. Now, it had sunk into the ground, breaking a big hole in the floor of the hall. The big hole was not connected to the lower floor, but to the void. There was a high concentration of distorted energy below the hole. Once someone fell in, they would first be washed by the distorted energy. Then, like a typhoon, they would be thrown into the void and thrown to an inexplicable place. Tilting his head to look at Old Thief and Qingyu, who were busy with their work, Yin Nuoxing turned back and waved his hand to erase the distorted area. He casually shook his hand. They were not afraid, but if these two fellows fell down, they might not be able to come up. Casually erasing the danger in the hall on this floor seemed superfluous, but would make it more convenient for Qingyu and Old Thief to do their work. Anyway, that level of trouble could be easily dealt with. They were still suppressing their own energy. If they did not suppress it, they would be able to push back the collapsed hall. It's done. It's fine here. My painstaking efforts. The results of these hundreds of thousands of years. Let's go to the next floor. Old Thief waved his hand to indicate that they could go to the next floor. After taking 2 steps, he turned back and looked at the pile of creatures that he had created with his own hands. A sense of sadness arose spontaneously, and he could not help but sigh. His face was full of sorrow. Seeing this, Yin Nuoxing and the others wished that they could use a massive energy to shut this guy's mouth. After skimming through this place, surrounded by distorted energy, the passage to the next floor was slightly safer. There was not too much energy surrounding it. Qing Yu and Old Thief checked their equipment and replenished their energy. After confirming that there was no problem, they continued to follow Yun Nuoxing and the others. After walking down for a few minutes, they suddenly saw something on the ground. Old Thief jumped over and picked it up. His eyes narrowed slightly. This is the 6th floor? Hey, why are there people inside? Didn't you withdraw your men? As soon as Yun Nuoxing and the others walked into the hall of the 6th floor, what rushed into their eyes was the intense, burning, distorted energy. The energy concentration was frighteningly high, and its form changed uncontrollably under such circumstances. Usually, without any guidance, these energies would turn into a sea of fire. It seemed to be burning, but it would not release heat or burn. It would only melt the objects attached to it bit by bit with a high concentration of energy. The situation in the hall of the 6th floor was even more dangerous. Furthermore, there was a light green energy barrier in the hall that was surrounded by dozens of creatures. Inside the barrier were 5 people who were struggling to move forward with difficulty. Their attire was similar to the people that they had seen before they came down. Group 6, didn't I tell you to retreat? Why did you come to the 6th floor? Everyone immediately rushed into the hall. When Old Thief saw that it was the members of Group 6 who had just sneaked into the 3rd floor to close the core, he could not help but widen his eyes. Out of concern, he was about to take a step forward when Yun Nuoxing suddenly grabbed his arm and pulled it back. A raging, uncontrollable energy suddenly surged in front of him and pierced through the wall at the other end of the hall. Old Thief was so scared that his face was covered in cold sweat. My lord! The members of Group 6 who were surrounded also saw the people rushing in from the entrance. Their faces turned pale as they quickly shouted, My lord, retreat quickly. These beasts are crazy. Ugh! Before they could finish their words, the crazy creatures that surrounded them were slapped by Yun Nuoxing and the others to the wall at the front of the hall. They were squeezed into skewers, then fell to the ground together and fainted. The members of Group 6 were so shocked that their mouths were wide open. Their faces were blank. However, they could still see that the crisis was over. They immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing Old Thief quickly walking over, the person who was probably the leader saluted and said respectfully, My lord, the path from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor is completely blocked. We can't delay them until they show a gap, so we can only go down and hope that we can open the suppression circle at the bottom floor. Please punish us for acting without permission. All right, I'll punish you with a hammer. Old Thief waved his hand, and the hall of the 6th floor immediately quieted down. Most of the distorted energy calmed down. He was also surprised. He looked at Yun Nuoxing, only to see him smile and wave his hand. He suddenly understood. Time is of the essence. Hurry up and pack up everything left on this floor. Since you're here, come with us. The leader nodded heavily. As he packed up the runic stones glowing with blue light under his feet, he reported, the barrier stone still has 70% energy left. It's enough to block a 4th-layer origin source attack for 5 minutes, or a 5th-layer origin source attack for 1 minute. It should come in handy. Yun Nuoxing saw him crouch down to pack up, and only then did he notice that there were a dozen palm-sized stones floating a foot off the ground. Those stones were arranged in a special formation around them, forming a tough energy barrier. It was probably this barrier that allowed Group 6 to last until they arrived. My lord, the sealed door has been attacked again. A member of Group 6 said in a deep voice, Since we arrived, the door has already been attacked 13 times. Each attack is stronger than the last. I'm afraid it won't be able to last much longer. Hearing the other party's words, Yun Nuoxing turned his gaze to the front of the hall of the 6th floor. There was a door there, and there was a large amount of spatial energy flowing around the door. The space behind the door was probably no longer a situation of descending stairs. Putting that aside, there was already so much distorted energy inside that he could pinch his nose through the door. The members of Group 6 surrounded the door, but they did not dare to come within 100 meters of it. There was a huge pressure preventing them from advancing. If the energy hidden behind the door suddenly erupted, let alone the third floor or the sixth floor. The energy would probably reach the upper floors of the prison and turn everything into ashes. No matter how I look at it, it doesn't look like it can last for more than 2 hours. Yin Nuashing quickly walked past the members of Group 6 and walked to the door under their fearful gazes. He took a deep breath and suddenly clenched his right hand into a fist. He slowly raised it and swung it out, as if he was practicing martial arts. He lightly punched the door. Although he said he punched the door, from Jing Yuanji's point of view, he only raised his fist and pressed it against the door. Then, the whole hall quieted down. There was no sound at all. There was no more violent energy at the door, and there was no more movement. It became dead silent all of a sudden. Even Jing Yuanji was stunned for a moment. She didn't feel anything just now, as if the matter was already over. This should be enough. Yin Nuashing casually clapped his hands. The creatures on the 7th floor and the last 2 floors were completely out of control. These 3 floors were like the deepest part of hell, filled with completely out of control, distorted energy. The energy could not be channeled and could not be discharged into the void. It was recklessly tumbling and surging in a narrow space. Sooner or later, the entire fragile hall would be blown away. He heard that they could last for 2 hours, but he personally sensed that the energy riot on the lower 3 floors was probably 100 times more serious than what Old Thief had imagined. With that amount of energy turbulence, the prison hall would become a thing of the past in less than an hour. They would not be able to last until the people above retreated. In this situation, where there was an excessive amount of distorted energy, there was no way to contact the people guarding the hall. "What are you all standing here for?" Yin Nuashing looked at the stunned members of Group 6 and waved his hand. "Time is of the essence now. We have been forced to give up on many things. While we can still move, hurry up and say some things. What are you all standing there for?" The leader of Group 6 shuddered and quickly nodded. He grabbed one member in each hand and hurried towards Old Thief to help clean up the broken core of the magic circle and the broken pieces of the creations on the ground. "We will go in and take a look. You all can take your time behind." Yin Nuashing waved his hand at Qing Yu and called Hui over. Then he slapped the door in front of him. The appearance of the 7th floor appeared in front of them in an instant. As he expected, there was not a staircase or half of a passage behind it. There was another space behind it, a space that was connected to the 6th floor. The connection between the 2 spaces was completely dependent on this portal that had spatial fluctuations. Yin Nuashing's hands swiped across the door that was more than 10 meters wide to maintain the stability of the portal. Then, he stepped into the space of the 7th floor. With a surge of spatial energy that was not too strong, he could tell that he had walked into another space. He turned his head and saw a wall. The door on this side was still there, but there was an open door hanging on the door. It was as if there were 2 doors here. One was closed and one was open. He had to look at it from the side to notice that there were 2 doors. Then there was the front. "Feng, look at these things, they have all turned into sculptures." Hui was jumping on a giant beast that was hundreds of feet tall, waving and shouting at them. Yin Nuashing also noticed that the creatures on the 7th floor were very different from those they had seen before. They were all engraved with scarlet energy patterns. When he touched the patterns with his hand, he could feel a texture between cotton and sponge. It was also like blood vessels. They were not just engraved on the surface of the skin. These things really grew out of the body. The concentration of distorted energy in this hall was even higher. It was almost tangible, but all of them were frozen in the last scene of them churning, including the dozens of huge deep-sea monsters here. Jing Yuanji only just noticed the strangeness of this hall. All the energy had disappeared, and there was no energy reaction. Even though there were so many lifelike energies in front of her that could be seen with the naked eye, she could not feel any energy at all. She pinched the energy that had solidified into sculptures with her hand and broke off a piece of it. "Lord Feng, these sculptures are..." She looked at Lord Feng with some confusion. She remembered that he was the one who lightly punched the door, and the whole hall became like this. "It's just frozen energy. It's nothing." Yin Nuashing waved his hand and said casually. He looked up at the many huge sculptures that were close at hand and said, I found that after these creations went out of control, almost 90% of their body structure turned into energy, distorted energy. So, this is the best way to deal with them. Want to defrost? Jing Yuanji poked a huge sculpture next to her. Yin Nuoxing shook his head. It's completely frozen. Don't even think about moving for 2 days. Leaving the bodies here is purely for them. Yin Nuoxing did not find anything special after observing for a while. He tried to touch the magic circles that were left behind to see if he could touch the core, like Qing Yu and the others. The result was that he almost destroyed 2 of the magic circles. Helpless, he could only ignore it as it was not his field of expertise. After the 7th floor, the 8th floor did not have any passageways, stairs, or any other gaps. There was not even a portal, and it was directly connected. However, there were no oceanic behemoths on the 8th floor, only broken magic circles and cages. Those behemoths probably squeezed into the 7th floor. There were not many creatures on these 2 floors, but each one was more powerful than the other. Aside from the cages, there were also some unknown pieces of equipment. However, the damage on the 8th floor was more severe. Even though the energy was completely frozen, the space was still in a gloomy and distorted state. Thick smoke drifted, and the ground and walls were left with charred marks from a fire. As for the 9th floor, there was a large door between the 8th and 9th floor. The door was still preserved by a very powerful seal. It was quiet behind the door, but the movement of energy could be felt. The movement is really exaggerated. We stood in front of the door, looked up at the 100-meter-tall door, and then looked at the 10,000-meter-high ceiling. He could not help but smack his lips. It was quiet all around, but he said that the movement was very big. Yin Nuoxing did not find anything wrong with it, because the movement was indeed very big. The movement of energy behind the door was not ordinary. It was equivalent to a life form at the peak of the 5th firmament of origin, constantly releasing energy from behind, filling every corner of the 9th floor with energy. The space inside was probably stuffed into a huge body of energy, ready to explode at any time. However, there was no big movement on the surface. Everything was carried out in silence. Yin Nuoxing patted the door and frowned. If we open the door, it will probably explode. The violent energy concentration is very high. If we freeze it rashly, we won't be able to freeze the whole thing in an instant. It will also destroy the balance, and it will also explode. To do that, we need to use more energy. Don't worry. We nudged him with his elbow, grinned, and gave him a thumbs up. A real man should be able to open the door fearlessly in the face of the energy of an entire hall. Yin Nuoxing pulled Jing Yuanji back a step and raised his hand high. Please, start your performance. I'm afraid I'll fly out. Then what are you talking about? Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. The 3 of them were, of course, not afraid of the level of energy behind the door. Even if it was 10 million times stronger, they would not be afraid. Even if they exposed their chests and took a direct hit, they would be fine. At most, they would be a little embarrassed. The problem was that they did not want to be embarrassed for no reason. Feng Lingjun, wait for me. You're running too fast. Qing Yu's shout was accompanied by the sound of hurried footsteps. Yin Nuoxing turned around and saw a sissy in a white robe running over the collapsing cracks like a girl. The sissy stopped beside him and said without panting, "How did you guys get in so quickly? That's the door to the 9th floor. I haven't been here for a long time." What's behind the door? Yin Nuoxing pointed at the door with his thumb. It did not move, but was actually on the verge of collapse. The movement behind the door is really big. I think that old bastard would be killed if he went in. What did you guys do to create such a level of creation? The 9th floor. Qing Yu looked at the closed door quietly. He could also feel the violent and deadly energy behind the door. He could not help but let out a long breath and said with a nostalgic tone, "There's only one creation on the 9th floor. It's a very smart guy. If there's a problem with the prison hall, it's actually the first to break free. It's also the most dangerous guy in the entire hall." Yin Nuoxing saw that Qing Yu was reminiscing. He held back for a while and did not say anything. Then, Qing Yu said, "Actually, the guy inside has something to do with me. Yin Nuoxing glanced at him and gestured with his chin for him to continue. Qing Yu nodded and looked at the door. This is a pure failure. It's the first creation of Huoda and his brothers after I took over the responsibility. Huh? Yin Nuoxing and the other two were stunned. The answer was a little beyond their imagination. Huoda, Huoxiaohua, and the others also have a self-cycle. When they grow to a certain point, they will leave a seed that contains all of them. Their original body will turn into a huge amount of energy and life force and dissipate into the ocean, waiting for the moment of rebirth. The new next generation will carry everything of the previous generation, except for the memories. So, every cycle is actually a new life. But in the past, before I took over the responsibility, there was no such cycle. The previous king, my father, they needed to create the light in the sea according to an accurate schedule. Huoda and the others' efficiency of converting light and heat was very low. It often took more than 30 cycles to maintain the heat of this world. Creations that cannot be cycled are actually failed creations in this world. They do not have a self-cycle and cannot enter the cycle of the environment. Such creations are not recognized. So, when I was chased back and took over the responsibility, I tried to change it. My father and the others had already explored it to a certain extent. I just needed to find a breakthrough. Qing Yu crossed his hands and wrapped his long white robe. He pursed his lips for a long time. Changing them from physical life forms to energy life forms was actually a breakthrough. It was my idea, but because we had never seen any energy life forms, there were many things that we could not understand clearly. Even if we used all our power to deduce, it was difficult to deduce a result out of thin air. But I still did it. The result of my impatience is, as you can see, he waved his hand and pointed ahead. The creature that kept emitting violent and distorted energy on the 9th floor was the product of his first mistake. I'm probably lucky. Qing Yu laughed dryly. After the first failure, it took 20 years of dedicated research to create the current big flame, medium flame, and small flame. They have also self-cycled twice and have remained stable. But the first failure is still a result that cannot be erased. Creating life forms that had never been seen before out of thin air was a feat that even Yin Nuoxing could not help but applaud. Energy life forms were no secret to people like them who had seen many things, but Qing Yu and the others had never seen them before. They probably only had vague memories of the names of such life forms. At most, they might know what kind of existence they were, but he had no way of knowing more about the laws and concepts. Under such circumstances, it only took 20 years to change a life form from a physical form to an energy form. Even if those in the divine realm knew about the laws and concepts, they would still have to pay a great price to change it. The difficulty was no less than the destructive calamity of entering the realm of reincarnation, let alone Qing Yu and the others. To be honest, it could be considered a miracle to have achieved results after only one failure. And then, Yin Nuoxing waved his hand in front of Hao Run to snap him back to reality. What happened after the boss of the Tri-Flame clan came out? When Blackfire came out, it was in a completely berserk state. Unstable energy had taken over its body. It was a disaster. Back then, it took the combined forces of the Northern and Southern empires, as well as 80% of the Eastern Domain's forces to suppress it. The Western Empire did their best to keep this world from being destroyed. In short, it took a lot of effort to imprison Blackfire in the Great Hall of Detention. Qing Yu sighed faintly, his completely calm face looking a little strained. Oh, sorry for interrupting your memories. Yin Nuoxing suddenly reached out and grabbed his arm. Your Blackfire seems to have a problem with your arrival. Qing Yu tilted his head and was stunned. In just a short while, Yin Nuoxing had pulled him and Jing Yuanji away like a flash of light. Hui also suddenly had goosebumps all over his body as he sensed something. With a loud cry, he followed them out of the 8th floor. Boom! The door that separated the 8th and 9th floors was suddenly blasted into powder by a burst of energy after they rushed out. Monstrous black flames accompanied by scarlet distorted energy flooded the 8th floor like a sea of fire. Hui, who was one step slower but had just left the 8th floor and hid behind Yinhuaxing's energy barrier, looked at the black flames sweeping over behind him and could not help but wipe his sweat. He looked at Qing Yu in a daze. This resentment is not ordinary. Why don't you go up and say something? Maybe it wants to catch up with you. Ow. Yinhuaxing smashed a fist on the head of the indecent guardian. Looking at the waves of flames and distorted energy that were getting more and more violent, she could not help but shake her head. Looking at the situation, black fire did not seem like it wanted to catch up with the past. Maybe it wanted to swallow Qing Yu whole. Chapter 14:17. The monstrous sea of black flames completely occupied the space behind the energy barrier. Within the tumbling flames, there was another type of energy that was even more violent and dangerous. It had turned into an accelerant, causing the flames to burn even more thoroughly. That energy was mixed with several emotions, and they were all emotions that Yinhuaxing was most familiar with: violence, hatred, and mania. Compared to this kind of crazy energy, the giant beasts on the 7th and 8th floors were simply little lambs. Even Yinhuaxing could not help but be moved. The feeling of wanting to let his flames burn the entire world simply made him see another version of himself. Bang! A huge energy shock wave erupted from the sea of flames and collided with the energy barrier, causing it to tremble. The energy that exploded turned into black flames that scattered throughout the entire space. Following that, several violent energy shock waves attacked, but they were all blocked by the energy barrier. However, the shock waves produced when the two sides collided caused the walls of the hall to collapse even more severely. Cracks spread to the corners of the walls, and it was likely that this space would not be able to withstand more than a few attacks from the black flames. A sharp and angry roar came from the sea of flames. It was unknown whether it was because they were not in the sea or because the leader of the Three Hua clan was particularly different, but even that voice sounded particularly ear-piercing. The sound waves seemed to contain a powerful shock wave. Hearing this roar, Qing Yu suddenly pressed his ears and squatted down with a pale face. A shock wave in the form of sound. Yinhuaxing squeaked to Hui. He nodded in understanding and raised his hand to wave it in front of his eyes. The energy barrier flickered because of this. The sound that surged and was still there, but it was not as ear-piercing as before. Yinhuaxing squatted down and looked at Qing Yu. That ear-piercing impact of the laws had been blocked outside, and he had also caught his breath. Oh, if it wasn't for his face being too pale, Yinhuaxing wouldn't have been able to determine whether he was fine or not. Damn it, he was just paralyzed on one side. Couldn't he at least show some fear or discomfort at this moment? What was with that incomparably calm expression, as if he was about to sacrifice his life in the next second? Are you all right? Qing Yu tilted her head to look at him and nodded lightly. I'm all right. Qing Yu stood up with Yinhuaxing's help. He looked at the sea of fire that was constantly attacking the barrier and couldn't help but sigh. He couldn't see the situation inside, but he could feel a gaze filled with violence and resentment. It had been locked onto him ever since the door to the 9th floor collapsed along with the wall. Its target was him, although I don't know what you're thinking of. Yinhuaxing saw a lot of meanings in his eyes. After a while, she turned her head to look at the sea of fire. Don't be silly, lest you add to the trouble. Black fire may be very powerful to you, and it may be a name full of trauma and sadness. But, to put it bluntly, it is not an existence that cannot be destroyed. For us, it won't take much effort to kill it. Mainly you. Me? Qing Yu raised his head to look at the side of her face, and his expression changed slightly. That's right, it's mainly him. It's a failure, but it's also your family's child. For now, there are 4 of us here. Well, at most, we can count those who are running over from behind. The biggest decision is yours, Yinhuaxing said softly. What do you plan to do? Don't say I don't know at this time. This hall looks like it can't hold on any longer. If you hesitate now, something bad will really happen. Yinhuaxing saw the confusion in his eyes and hurriedly smacked him on the head. If you're a man, then be ruthless. You can either seal it or kill it. Be ruthless? Qing Yu's cheeks trembled slightly, and he smiled bitterly. He looked at the sea of fire that was already unable to restrain its anger, and his brows furrowed slightly. His calm expression finally broke, and he gritted his teeth. Can you subdue it first? Yin Nuoxing saw that he finally showed a different expression and couldn't help but laugh. Well, I'll leave the rest to you, right? I know. Hui, it's time to work. Oh. Hui laughed and nodded. They were suppressing their strength, but it was about the same level as black fire. This scene was just like the scene in SUA that day. When they were facing the Supreme, they couldn't use their full strength. UNG, you don't have to go in. Help to stabilize the space of the hall. Don't let black fire not burn the hall down, but collapse it because of us. Yin Nuoxing patted Jing Yuanji's back, and then rushed into the barrier with Hui in a flash. Jing Yuanji heard the order and subconsciously used her strength to stabilize the space. After a moment, she heard the name clearly, and her expression was a little unnatural, and her pretty face was slightly red. Mei Mao stared at the sea of fire and couldn't help but mutter, Lord Feng is getting closer and closer. Stepping lightly on a rolling black fire wave, the flame suddenly broke away from the control of the sea of fire and rushed forward with Yun Oshing's footsteps. Hui was 2 meters away from him, floating in the air. The two of them stared straight ahead. There is no need to be vigilant of other places. There was no need to look at other places. The guy did not intend to hide his figure, and they did not intend to do so either. The sea of fire in front of them was suddenly pierced by a powerful force, and 2 huge flame pillars came from the front. They hit the space 10 feet in front of Yin Nuoxing and Hui, and exploded into flames. They circled around the two of them a few times, and then slowly fell into the sea of fire below. Buzz, the owner of this flame territory, let out an angry roar. This time, it sounded a little similar to the sound of the 3 fires, but it had a completely different flavor. In the space hundreds of feet around Yin Nuoxing and Hui, dozens of black fire tornadoes filled with scarlet energy suddenly appeared. The crazy tearing force, accompanied by the energy that was enough to annihilate the rules, crashed towards them from all directions. Yin Nuoxing stretched out his hand and pressed on his long hair and robe that were messed up by the strong wind. He opened his mouth and blew lightly. Before those fire tornadoes could come within 10 feet of him, they once again shattered into sparks that filled the sky. He raised his left hand and lightly snapped his fingers. There was a sudden burst of energy deep in the sea of fire. The monstrous energy was absorbed by the exploding energy ball and turned into a continuous energy shock wave that spread out in all directions, causing the sea of fire to become turbulent. Don't you plan to show yourself? Yin Nuoxing looked at the burst of dazzling energy and showed a strange smile. Energy life forms are extremely rare to you, and there are only 3-4 of you in this world. But to us, energy life forms are as common as cabbages. Do you really think you can deal with us by hiding and locking onto us with your aura? Or do you think this will be safe? There was no movement deep in the sea of fire. Only the energy ball kept releasing violent energy. Yin Nuoxing grinned. Hui, break its territory. What? Hui was stunned for a moment and scratched his head. You have better control of energy than me. Why me? I'm afraid I'll kill it. Hui blinked. After a moment, he thought of something and said, Oh, that's true. You don't know how to control your strength. After all, now, seeing that Yin Nuoxing glanced at him with evil intentions, Hui shivered and quickly shut up. Before he was thrown into the sea of fire, he quickly took out the guardian's sword from his chest. The sacred energy turned into a hurricane and swept out. The sea of fire where he stood was pressed down by dozens of feet. The hurricane circled for a while and suddenly turned into circles of tangible energy that swept out in all directions like slow shock waves. Sacred shock. It was not fun to be stared at by a crazy creature that had suppressed its power and his partner. We put on an extremely serious expression. The energy was completely condensed in a few breaths. He held the big sword that had become a carrier of sacred energy with both hands. With a light shout, he swung the sword and smashed the space in front of him. The space was like a mirror, and with a soft sound, a large number of cracks appeared. The divine energy rushed into the cracks and the surrounding space at an even faster speed. The cracks were filled with the golden light of divine energy, and they expanded at an astonishing speed. The sea of fire below was condensed into a huge whirlpool by the surging divine energy. When the cracks pierced into the sea of fire, the whirlpool lost its order and was disrupted. A moment later, an earth-shattering sound resounded throughout the prison hall. The space seemed to have turned into a mirror in an instant. At that moment, it was freed from the shackles of the mirror. The sea of fire in the sky retreated toward the space of the 9th floor as if it was frightened. Yun Nuoxing's motionless figure suddenly turned into a black shadow and swept out. The sea of fire that had spread to every corner of the space of the 2 floors suddenly shrank toward the 9th floor in a dispirited state. It gathered together in the depths of the space and quickly condensed into a huge body. Its complete body had appeared, but it was still relatively dim and transparent, like a shadow and a soul, as if it did not have a physical body. Yun Nuoxing had seen the appearance of that body before. It was exactly the same as Big Fire, except that the color of Black Fire was different. Its entire body was black and scarlet, and its black scales were engraved with scarlet patterns. The lamp hanging on its head also emitted a black and cold light. Yun Nuoxing's figure was like a ghost mixed in with the black flames that were constantly retreating into Black Fire's body. The dark red energy in his hand quickly condensed into a ball. A moment later, the ball began to collapse and continuously gathered toward the inside. Gradually, it condensed into a dark red energy crystal. When it rushed along the sea current to more than 100 meters in front of the huge body, he shouted and threw the energy crystal in his hand. Watching it rush into Black Fire's illusory body along with the flames, he stopped where he was and then turned around and walked outside step by step. Buzz! Everything happened in a short while. From the time when Yun Nuoxing destroyed Black Fire's domain to the time when it condensed its body again, Yun Nuoxing had already walked out for a while. When Black Fire condensed its body again, its pair of eyes that were blurred by distorted energy locked onto Yun Nuoxing, who was casually strolling out below. A hint of brutality suddenly surged in its eyes. Without using any energy to attack, it fell from above like a meteorite. It only remembered to use its black flames while falling. The cold black flames condensed into a densely packed energy spear that pounced toward Yun Nuoxing like raindrops. Just as it was about to attack, Black Fire suddenly heard a faintly discernible voice. Should it be medium rare or medium rare? Qingyu will probably have to deal with it herself. However, the difference between a 5th heaven and a 2nd heaven is too big. Medium rare doesn't seem to be much of a guarantee. How about 90%? Black Fire's irritable gaze suddenly froze. It looked at the tiny human that was already very close to it. It watched as he ignored all of its attacks. The energy spear rain covered all of his escape routes. The violent energy attacks landed on his body, but he didn't dodge or defend himself. It was as if he already knew that the energy attacks wouldn't affect him. Hui. Oh, you said medium rare, right? Then let's make it medium rare. The pleasant conversation with a faint smile made Black Fire extremely angry. Just as it was about to turn into a meteorite and fall down, a dark red light suddenly flickered in its body. An indescribable destructive energy emerged from its body, and then it suddenly bloomed. The rich destructive energy swept the distorted energy and Black Fire's energy into the core vortex, igniting every bit of energy and causing a violent chain of energy explosions in its body. The extremely violent destructive energy occupied every inch of its body in an instant. Black Fire's huge body was like a sieve as violent energy attacks erupted from every inch of its body. The excess energy turned into a shock wave and spread out, giving the shattered and almost scarred walls a final blow. The 8th and ninth floors completely collapsed. If it weren't for Jing Yuanji supporting them from the outside, the fragments of the walls would have all fallen down. Yin Nuoxing, Hui, and Blackfire might have been crushed under the rubble. The huge destructive energy from Blackfire's body completely crushed the power of the rules it controlled, as if it had swallowed a bomb. Even its own energy was completely ignited. Part of it was used to detonate the explosion, and the other part was thrown out of its body by the energy. Blackfire's huge, bruised body emitted a dark red energy light, like a falling spaceship drawing a diagonal line in the air as it fell toward the 7th floor. As it fell, it kept dropping debris. Those scales and black fur balls fell down like the parts of a collapsing spaceship. Yun Nuoxing's energy transformed into an umbrella, blocking the scales and the huge dark ball of light that were about to smash down on his head. The surrounding space trembled as the huge object streaked across the space above his head. He couldn't help but raise his head. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of a black shadow from the corner of his eye. He was stunned for a moment. He only had time to see the back half of Blackfire's dark body. A piece of its tail that looked like a ray fell and hit his face, making him feel depressed. Yin Nuoxing took off the huge piece of tissue that was stuck on his face. He sniffled and was stunned. That's not right. Why is it 90% done? Hui helped him carry the piece of tissue forward. When he heard what Hui said, he couldn't help but say, I told you that you don't know how to control your strength. That's why I let you roast at 70%. Isn't it 90% done? If I let you roast at 90% at the beginning, Blackfire wouldn't even have a breath left. Yin Nuoxing's eyes drifted. I understand. Well, I can't calculate it so accurately when I'm suppressing the energy. I try my best. Hey, anyway, you don't know how to control your strength. Hey, stop. I'm wrong. Don't hit me. Do you want to know the real reason? Yin Nuoxing raised his hand and was about to beat him up. He was slightly stunned when he heard Huey's words. He looked at Hui, who was holding his head with one hand and holding the skate-like thing with the other. He frowned. What's the real reason? You don't know how to control your strength. Okay, I'll say it for the last time. Put down that stick. Hui pointed at him and trembled as he stepped back. Yin Nuoxing waved the stick in his hand. He curled his lips and put it away. Ahem. Hui coughed softly and looked at him seriously. He said, Since you controlled the origin energy, I've noticed that your control over your own energy is getting worse and worse. Yin Nuoxing frowned. He lowered his head and looked at his hands. He squeezed them hard, allowing some energy to circulate in his body. A moment later, he shook his head. I don't feel that way. I feel that everything is fine. Well, it's the origin energy after all. It's normal that you can't feel it clearly, but I can see it very clearly. Hui shrugged. But I can't help you too much. I don't know much about the problem of the origin energy. You can only solve this by yourself. Take the origin energy and your own energy apart and see. I can only give you some hints that you can think of. Hui took 2 or 3 steps away and looked at Yin Nuoxing, who was deep in thought. He could not help but say, Otherwise, you can't explain the situation where your strength is getting worse and worse. It's true. You just didn't notice it. Recently, there hasn't been any battle that's worth you using your full strength. Plus, I've been fusing with you to make up for this small flaw. So we didn't notice it. Well, I just noticed it. If you didn't mention it, I wouldn't have noticed it. Without waiting for Yin Nuoxing to come back to his senses, the little angel whispered in his soul again. He looked at the mountains, lakes, and rivers in the distance of the spiritual world and could not help but shake his head. Although the origin energy was a good thing, the most frightening thing was that it could not withstand it. And according to the current situation, perhaps a little bit of drawback had already emerged. Since both people had said so, it seemed that it was not wrong. Moreover, one of them was sleeping in his soul. He could not help but let out a long sigh. When the black fire in front of him hit the energy barrier and ended with a violent roar, he looked up and clenched his hands hard. His arms were cracking all over. After that, he walked forward as if nothing had happened. Forget it. We'll talk about it when the time comes. Hui heard the indifferent and fearless voice behind him. He could not help but turn around. He saw someone walking with his head half raised and looking at the world with disdain. Hui was stunned for a moment. Forget it. You mean, anyway, I'm not the one who's going to die. What does it have to do with me? Yin Nuoxing spread his hands with a look of disdain. First, it won't affect me from casting the magic circle. Second, it won't affect me from beating people up. It's just a matter of whether I'm serious or not. It won't affect my energy circulation, right? Why do you care so much? We'll talk about it when we have time. It won't affect me if it doesn't affect me from beating people up. Huey's face twitched violently. This guy had chosen the option of not being a human again. After all, they were going to die. Wait, that's not right. Anyway, those things that he had to deal with now did not need to be treated as humans. So what if they died? But why did it sound a little awkward? The energy barrier had been lifted. Qingyu trotted in front of the black fire when it fell. When she saw that it was on the verge of death, her hand trembled slightly. Yin Nuoxing looked at the master and pet. He could not help but sigh softly. He looked at Jing Yuanji and nodded. Jing Yuanji knew what that look meant without any instructions. She nodded gently and took 2 steps forward to guard the place in case there were any accidents. Yin Nuoxing glanced at Qingyu, who didn't know what expression she should show. In short, that extremely calm expression finally collapsed. Looking at her somewhat delicate and pitiful appearance, he sighed and pulled Hui towards the 9th level. He didn't really want to see that scene. Chapter 14:18. The 9th floor of the prison hall was so clean that there was no debris. Standing at the door, one could see the damaged walls of the hall, the shattered floor, the debris, and the things that existed on the 9th floor had disappeared along with the black sea of fire. It was clear at a glance that it was a mess, and there was nothing left. It's so clean. That fire burned everything away. Hui walked beside Yin Nuoxing on the collapsed floor of the hall. He tapped the ground with the tip of his foot from time to time, and all the dangerous cracks on the ground disappeared. As for the wall, there was no need to repair it. After a while, when Jing Yuanji opened up the frozen space, this place would collapse like a skyscraper that had lost its skeleton. Then it would probably float in the void. Probably a part of it was actually me who got rid of it. Yin Nuoxing thought for a while and laughed self-deprecatingly. Then she shook her head. But it's really too clean, But it's not like there's nothing left. Look, isn't there something left? Yin Nuoxing raised her hand and pointed to the depths of the hall on the 9th floor. We looked inside and couldn't help but cry out in surprise. Wow, that thing. What is that thing? In the hall on the 9th floor, there was a crystal pagoda hanging from the ceiling. It looked very magnificent and towering, but it was hanging upside down from the ceiling. The huge base of the pagoda was separated orderly on the ceiling, forming a circle about 1,000 meters wide. It fell in circles, spanning a height of almost 10,000 meters and landing about 10 meters off the ground. It looked a little like a very sharp and thin stalactite. The crystal pagoda was emitting a crystal clear blue light, and there was a light film like an energy barrier covering its surface. As time passed, it flashed brightly and dimly as if it was breathing. The crystal pagoda was illuminated by the bright and dark light until it revealed its transparent body. At the base of the ceiling, there were circles of blue light spreading out in an orderly manner, sweeping across the entire hall of the 9th floor. It looked very beautiful. It's a carrier similar to our energy pagoda. Based on the information at hand, its body is probably made using the magic circle and runic stone of this world. It's a completely non-physical thing. But I can't see any traces of magic circle or runic stone. It's a little strange. Could it only exist in the core? Yin Nuoxing looked at the beautiful crystal pagoda and didn't analyze it deeply, lest she saw other people's secrets. Suddenly, she thought of something, blinked, and took a few steps back. As she took a few steps back, she said, I didn't see this thing just now. How could I not see such a magnificent thing? I can't see it now. Hui, try taking a few steps back. Hui heard her and took a few steps back. When he retreated to Yin Nuoxing's side, He was surprised to find that the beautiful crystal pagoda had disappeared from his sight, as if he had never seen it before. What's the reason? Hui scratched his head in puzzlement. He basically couldn't solve this kind of problem. After all, his brain wasn't as good as Feng's. There can be many kinds of situations, but I don't know what kind of situation this crystal pagoda is in. Yin Nuoxing shook her head and didn't say anything about the crystal pagoda. She took a step forward and saw that the crystal pagoda was indeed there, safe and sound. She turned around and was about to go back and call Qingyu or Old Thief over when she suddenly stopped. She couldn't help but lower her head and sigh. We saw her strange action and also turn around. His eyes saw that there was a large amount of energy light disappearing from the 8th floor. Countless energy particles rose from the sea of light and flew into the air. After releasing energy and life force, they dissipated in this space. More and more particles flew up. It was as if an ocean of light had risen from the ground. There were energy halos being released continuously. It was a beautiful sight. So beautiful. We couldn't help but sigh softly. Unlike the funeral of a god, this was the scene of the eldest of the Three Flames clans passing away. Although the dazzling energy phenomenon wasn't as grand and magnificent as the former, it was also the first time they had seen a funeral that could be considered beautiful. The other funerals were mostly grand and filled with endless sorrow. Perhaps there were also many obsessions. Even with the distortion energy turning it into a strange appearance, this rain of light is still so pure. Yin Nuoxing heard and nodded. When the energy life disappeared and returned to the void, it was at its purest. Jing Yuanji stood in the sea of light and looked at the light particles drifting to every corner. When she saw them dissipating into the void, she also lowered her head slightly. Qingyu squatted at the side and didn't say a word. A large amount of energy particles leaked out from between her fingers. That action looked like she was praying, but she wasn't sure if this world had such a praying posture. Old Thief and the members of Group 6 who rushed over from behind also saw the dazzling energy rain of light. They all let out a long sigh of relief and lowered their heads. They clenched their fists and patted their chests. They murmured, "Buddy, have a safe journey. Thank you for everything you have done for this world." There was an aura of life disappearing in the rain of light. It wasn't a cycle of life, and there was no rebirth. In the rain of light, where black flame disappeared, there wasn't an aura of life cycle. It was a complete death and self-disintegration. Yin Nuoxing also didn't know what Qingyu said or did to black flame at the last moment. He only knew that this was the result. A few minutes later, when the rain of light completely disappeared, Old Thief slowly walked forward. He looked at Qingyu, who was still squatting there with her hands clasped together, and didn't say a word. He couldn't help but sigh. He also squatted down and pressed on her shoulder. "Cheer up, there's still time." Yin Nuoxing and Hui slowly walked closer. Their eyes caught a glimpse of a dim light in Qingyu's clasped hands. They couldn't help but be stunned. The light was very dim. It was impossible to see it with normal eyes. It was a very weak light of energy that could dissipate at any time. There was no aura of life. Of course, it was probably a light left behind by black flame. He couldn't say comforting words for a long time. He could only say directly, "We found a strange crystal pagoda on the 9th floor. Do you know what it is?" Crystal pagoda? Old Thief was slightly stunned. He looked at the members of Group 6 with puzzled eyes. They all shook their heads. "I've never heard of any crystal pagoda on the 9th floor. And we usually don't go to the 9th floor. That space hasn't been open for many years." "Oh." Yin Nuoxing tilted her head and shrugged. "You'll know when you see it. I don't know what happened between you two. When you walk halfway to the 9th floor, you can see the crystal pagoda. Before that, you can't see it. You guys go and see it first." Old Thief nodded and waved his hand to let the members of Group 6 go first. He stood up and looked at Qingyu, who still hadn't recovered. He couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. What was helpless was that he didn't know how to comfort people. Squeaking was already the best he could do. Yin Nuoxing looked at Qingyu and felt a sense of loss and sadness from him. He suddenly wanted to see what kind of expression he had at this moment. He had hurriedly caught a glimpse of his pitiful expression when he turned around. Now, he was suddenly very interested. He really wanted to see what kind of expression he had after breaking through the bottleneck. Thus, he let his curiosity push him and slowly squatted down to look at his face. Well, he was disappointed. He didn't see any other expression. Qing Yu's eyes were closed at this moment. His bangs hung down and covered some of his face. His face was still as calm as ever, but in that calmness, there was a hint of sadness and nostalgia. He completely didn't know how Qing Yu could make such a difficult expression, as expected of the 10,000-year facial paralysis. Speaking of which, it didn't look like facial paralysis at all. When Quarter Moon's mentality exploded in the middle of her life, she was a real facial paralysis. Her face was engraved with undispersible coldness and murderous intent. That was probably because Qing Yu was too calm at the bottom of his heart. That was why he could make such an expression. It was as if he wouldn't panic even if the void collapsed in front of him. Inexplicably, Yin Nuoxing took a light breath. He reached out and patted Qing Yu's shoulder. He said softly, "Come back to your senses, Qing Yu. Right now, it's not the end yet. The main hall isn't safe." Before he could finish speaking, Qing Yu slowly raised his head. As he expected, he revealed a face that was as calm as ever. He forced a smile and nodded. "Let's go to the 9th floor and take a look." The group quickly arrived at the 9th floor. The rumbling sounds of the main hall collapsing were endless. Apart from the repaired floor, the walls and ceiling had all collapsed to varying degrees. Layers of debris were piled up on the floor. The distorted energy outside the main hall was constantly trying to burrow into the hall through the holes in the walls. However, it was blocked by a transparent blue barrier. Even after several powerful attacks, it still couldn't make a single hole in the barrier. The speed of the main hall's collapse was a little beyond Old Thief and Qing Yu's imagination. They didn't waste any time talking and quickly arrived at where the members of Group 6 were standing. They raised their heads and saw the crystal pagoda. Yin Nuoxing also looked at the crystal pagoda again. This time, he found that it was made up of countless pieces of energy plates of different lengths and widths. However, the thickness was exactly the same. Countless types of energy plates were piled up to form the crystal pagoda that was hanging upside down from the ceiling. The cracks on the ceiling wouldn't spread to the crystal pagoda for a while, but it wasn't too far away. "How is it? Have you figured out what it is?" Old Thief looked at the members of Group 6 and asked. The leader of Group 6 frowned and shook his head vigorously. "I don't know. I don't know at all. This crystal pagoda is also a kind of energy creation. However, its purity isn't something we can achieve. We don't even know what its function is." "When did such a thing appear on the 9th floor?" Old Thief frowned fiercely. He was completely sure that such a thing wasn't present when the main hall was first built. It wasn't present when it was first built. It doesn't exist in your memories either. No one would come here if there wasn't anything happening on the 9th floor. Yin Nuoxing looked up for a while and suddenly said, "Could it be something made by Blackfire?" Although it wasn't a good time to mention this name, there wouldn't be any clues if he didn't mention it. He could only make such a guess. However, he quickly came up with a second guess. Or, it appeared here for some unknown reason after the core riot. If you're sure that it's not something you made, why don't you let us take a look? Old Thief tilted his head and glanced at Qing Yu. The latter pondered for a moment and also tilted her head to look at him. She then nodded. "If that's the case, then I'll leave it to you, Lord Feng Ling." Yin Nuoxing nodded and slowly floated up from the ground. Dark red energy formed a layer of energy barrier around him to prevent any accidents from happening. He quickly came to the top of the crystal pagoda and looked at the cylinder surrounded by 4 crystal plates at the top. After looking at it for a while, he reached out his hand and gently touched it. There was no reaction and no change. The crystal pagoda didn't seem to have any excessive reaction to his touch. Yin Nuoxing observed for a moment, then carefully used energy to wrap his soul power and poured it into the crystal pagoda. After a moment of contact, he received some information that was worth his attention. This was indeed an external object. Just as he guessed, after the core exploded, most of the energy turned and rushed into the prison hall. Putting aside the reason for the energy explosion, all of it rushed here purely because it was attracted by the energy of the black fire. That huge amount of distorted energy and the energy of the black fire that was exposed to the ninth floor had an inexplicable reaction. In the end, it formed this kind of energy crystal. He couldn't see the specific process of the formation of the energy crystal and couldn't analyze it. To be honest, he also felt that it was very strange. What kind of characteristics did the first generation distorted energy and the third generation distorted energy have to cause such a strange change? If not, then the first generation distorted energy and the creation of the black fire. What kind of inexplicable connection did they have? In the end, he couldn't figure out the relationship between these kinds of energy. The only thing he knew was that it was an energy crystal formed by energy. Nearby, there was nothing else. Also, the energy concentration of this thing was very high. This was nonsense. How could the concentration of energy be low if it could condense into an energy crystal? Really, other than these, he couldn't summarize anything else. After a moment, Yin Nuoxing landed on the ground. Hui, Qing Yu, and the others hurriedly came over. How is it? What's the situation? Yin Nuoxing shook his head. I'm not sure. That thing is an energy crystal formed by the combination of two kinds of energy. One kind of energy is the energy of the black fire, and the other is the energy released by the core explosion. Everyone was slightly stunned. How did these two things, which sounded very different, come together? The energy of the core explosion was attracted by the energy of the black fire. Yin Nuoxing continued. This is not an accident or a coincidence. It's an inevitable event. It's just that we don't know the situation. We don't know how these two kinds of energy are related, so we can only call it a coincidence. Boom! The remaining violent and distorted energy in the prison hall, or the fighting on the first and second floors, awakened everyone from their contemplation. Everyone looked at each other. Qing Yu looked at Yin Nuoxing. Feng Lingjun, is there a way to dismantle this crystal tower? Dismantle? The corner of Yin Nuoxing's eyes twitched. He looked up at the crystal tower in front of him and frowned. Some silver-white light surged in his eyes. He stared at the crystal tower for a moment and understood more. This thing would maintain a regular integrity. Even if it was dismantled into thousands of pieces, as long as its regularity was not broken, it would be complete. This thing looks like it's fixed here. How do we move it back? Tear down the ceiling? We scratch his head. He also felt a headache looking at this indomitable crystal tower, although he could also see that the crystal tower had a self-preserving characteristic. Break it, move it out, and put it back together. You're dismantling it into thousands of pieces. Even if you can put it back together, I won't do it with you. Yin Nuoxing's face darkened. How long would it take to put it back together if it was dismantled into thousands of pieces? Those parts almost all looked the same. Then how do we do it? Hui floated around the crystal tower and poked it with his finger from time to time. Old Thief and Qing Yu were scared out of their wits. They were afraid that he would poke the crystal tower in the next second. Then, such a huge tower would turn into a sky full of crystal fragments and fall down. It would probably bury them all alive. Yin Nuoxing swayed in place for a while. She subconsciously twirled her hair with her fingers. There were rays of light in her eyes. She was probably thinking of a solution in her memory. Hui, come down. I've thought of a solution. Yin Nuoxing's eyes turned silver. Her footsteps stopped at this moment. Then, she raised her head and shouted at the guy who was flying around the crystal tower like a fly. Yin Nuoxing, who took a few steps forward and was about to do something, suddenly thought of something. Her expression became a little strange. Then, she tilted her body and waved at everyone. Go, turn around. Don't look. What? What's so fun about it? Why don't you let me look? Hui went up with a word, asking for a beating on his head. He circled Yin Nuoxing twice with a mischievous smile and poked her back with his elbow. Hurry up, don't be shy. Wah. Yin Nuoxing kicked Hui 10 meters away. Her face was slightly red. She pointed at those confused guys. Hurry up. Turn around. Don't look. Old Thief, Qing Yu, and the others trembled and quickly turned around. Old Thief also pressed the head of certain guy from Group 6 who was not afraid of death. Yin Nuoxing saw that Jing Yuanji also obediently turned around. After confirming that Hui did not intend to get up for a while, she walked forward with relief. Her figure floated to the top of the crystal tower. This thing is too big. He looked at this huge crystal tower and couldn't help but blush. Even if he really had a way to preserve this thing, its size was too big. He couldn't help but lower his head and measure his body with his gaze, especially his height. He hesitated for a while. The sound of the hall collapsing made him come back to his senses. The hesitation on his face faded away. He took a deep breath and paused for a moment. Then, he suddenly turned around to look at everyone. After confirming that no one was looking back, he heaved a sigh of relief. His figure slowly turned silver-white. In the energy form, he completely released his soul and spirit. These two types of powers suddenly lost their restraints and spread out. They stuck to the crystal tower and enveloped the entire crystal tower in a few seconds. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath and reached out to touch the small cylinder at the top of the crystal tower. Then, she slowly opened her mouth a little. The crystal tower that was enveloped by soul and spirit suddenly trembled. The top began to turn into a gray stream of air. The main body was separated and contained in the gray stream of air. Following the guidance, it flowed into her mouth. She didn't actually eat it into her body. She just stored it in her energy form. This was a special ability of energy life forms, but it wasn't used often, who liked to put things into their body for no reason. It looked weird. However, this thing couldn't be stored in the soul world or spirit world, so she could only bring it into her body. Moreover, not just any energy life form could do this kind of thing. If one didn't have good enough control over their own body and their own laws weren't strong enough, it was easy for them to break down the things that they ate or not be able to break them down and end up in their stomachs. Jing Yuanji felt a strange energy movement behind her. Just as she was about to turn her head, she suddenly remembered Lord Feng's words. She forced herself to hold it back. Her jade-like fingers touched each other and kept twisting. The curiosity and worry in her heart continued to grow, making the turning of her head more and more obvious. After struggling for about a minute, she finally couldn't help but turn her head. Then, she saw the strange scene. At that time, only 1/3 of the crystal tower was left. The speed at which the crystal tower turned into a gray stream of air was getting faster and faster, and it quickly flowed into Lord Feng's mouth. This glance satisfied her curiosity, but she couldn't help but keep staring. It wasn't until she saw that the tower was about to completely disappear that she suddenly snapped back to reality. She quickly turned her head and took a deep breath. She calmed herself down. Her heart didn't beat wildly, and she didn't pant. She pretended that she didn't see anything. After swallowing the entire crystal tower into her body, Yin Nuoxing wiped the corner of her mouth and let out a long breath. The silvery white color on her body gradually faded. Then, she touched her body with a strange expression. I keep feeling a little weird somewhere. That thing's existence capacity is much larger than I thought. I feel like my stomach is a little bloated. It won't hurt your stomach, right? Oh, that's not right. According to the structure of energy life forms, well, my brain is a little bloated. It won't hurt my brain, right? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.